We're just trying to get the mic to work.
Turn it on?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, there it is. Okay. Good evening. The time is 6:51, and we'll now call the meeting to order. The first order of business is to elect a moderator. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Sean Manning, the moderator.
Is there a second? Ralph? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Nay. Are there any other nominations?
I move nominations be closed. I'll second that motion.
Is there a, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I would next like to read the call of the meeting into record as published in the River East News Bulletin on August 11th, 2023. I would also like to ask the town clerk to record the notice along with the minutes of this meeting. Legal notice of special town meeting Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 6:50 p.m. Buck Foreman Community Room, 265 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut, 06480. Pursuant to Chapter 5, Section 503G of the Town Charter, a special town meeting will be held by the Board of Selectmen on Wednesday, August 16th, 2023 at 6:50 p.m. in the Buck Foreman Community Room, 265 Main Street, Portland, Connecticut for the following. Item 1, to approve the amount of $100,000 for a 2023 Small Town Economic Assistance Program, STEEP grant from Fund 8 Capital Non-Reoccurring Fund, Water Department, facility and system upgrades to allow the town to contribute towards the match for the $500,000 grant application. A copy of the complete resolution to be voted on is available for public inspection in the town clerk's office and on the town's website at www.portlandct.org, dated this 10th day of August 2023, attest Ryan J. Curley, First Selectman. I would now like to entertain a motion to introduce the resolution entitled Steep Grant High Street Water Main Replacement.
So moved.
In a second?
Second.
I will now read the resolution. Special Town Meeting Resolution, Town of Portland, Connecticut, August 16th, 2023. Steep Grant High Street Water Main Replacement. Whereas the Office of Policy and Management, OPM, has recently announced a 2023 Small Town Economic Assistance Program, STEEP grant, with an award of up to $500,000 for municipalities, and whereas there is a need to continue to replace aging asbestos water pipes and related service lines throughout the town, and whereas STEEP funds cannot be used for design, studies, planning, and/or engineering of the project, and whereas preference for awards will be given to those that provide a match of the total project cost, and whereas $100,000 of Fund 8 Capital Non-Reoccurring Fund, Water Department facility and system upgrades will allow the town to contribute towards the match for the $500,000 grant application. And whereas, should the STEEP grant be awarded, the $100,000 will be required to be used as a match. And whereas, pursuant to Chapter 12, Section 1203-4, this supplemental appropriation is subject to approval at a special town meeting of which was held on August 16th, 2023. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen hereby approves submission of the 2023 STEEP grant application and providing the $100,000 match, and it be further resolved that Ryan J. Curley, First Selectman, and/or his designee may sign and execute any required documents for the grant process. This resolution is in accordance with Portland Town Charter Section 503G. I will now call for public discussion on this resolution. Hearing none, being no further discussion, I will entertain a motion to move the question tonight.
I move to the question. I'll second that motion.
Okay. So we have the ballots. If anybody came in late, you can sign in for the town meeting and we can give you a ballot. There's a box up here. Just write yes or no and you can put it in the ballot box.
The motion passes. The result of the vote was 10 yes, 0 no, 0 abstention.
I move to adjourn. I'll
Second.
that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The meeting is now adjourned at 6:59.
Good evening. The time is 7 p.m. and I will now call this regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, the next item on tonight's agenda is the approval of minutes from, we have two today. We have our regular meeting from July 19th, 2023. Has everyone been able to review those? And if so, is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion we approve those.
Thank you, Sean. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, well, before we move forward, I have an amendment to those.
Yep.
I realized that I said a mouthful in one section on page 3, and when I was speaking about it, I was referencing the fact that we should kind of refer back to the a former Portland Building Utilization Committee notes for guidance. That would be, I'll make it simple. I have the suggested edit for you. I typed it all up, so after meeting, I can hand it to our secretary, and we're all set.
Sure, do you want to read it into the
Yeah.
record?
What I have it reading is the change. John Dillon referenced a previous Portland Town Building Utilization Committee established to review vacant buildings, including the former Central School and former Senior Center. He recommends researching archives of that committee for guidance. We must learn more from what we've done before and have a better plan for what we do with these buildings. We can't have them empty and rotting away. But yeah, so I have it all typed up for you.
All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
So is there a motion, or who had approved it before? Would you like to amend your motion?
Now, amend my motion to
Approve the minutes?
approve the
as-
minutes as John amended them.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Any further discussion, errors, changes, omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. The next item is the approval of minutes from our special meeting on June 28th, 2023. Is there a motion to approve those?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
And once again, I'll amend it.
Okay.
I'm listed as participating in the meeting, but I was unable to call in for that meeting.
That's right. Okay.
So all I would say is just put me not present for that meeting. I was at the shore and I couldn't get to the phone in time.
Okay. And you'll amend your,
I'll amend that.
Ralph, you'll amend your motion, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other changes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. All right. The next item is the approval of tonight's agenda. I realize we have a busy agenda this evening. Our Emergency Management Director, Don Guin, reminded me that there was a late addition that we need to put on tonight's agenda. So this, we have a resolution for the board to authorize myself to be able to sign a grant application with the State of Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection and Homeland Security. So I'd like to put that under new business as B, so that the current B, which is resolution contract award for sidewalks, would become C, and then so on and so forth down. So we will have a new B, and everything else will just shift down one. And with that, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second that.
Thank you both. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. All right, next, excuse me, under communications and correspondence, I have one that I'd like to share this evening with you all. And I have some good news to share. We finally heard back from GZA. For those of you that don't know, they are our water engineering firm that have been helping the town locate a new water source for the town of Portland. And as you may know, the town had drilled, or GZA had drilled 2 wells on the town's behalf just north of our Portland Recreational Complex, our new baseball park fields, and we drilled 2 test wells back in July or June. And of those 2, we finally received the report yesterday. And so I'll just read you the highlight. GZA summary of the well construction, pumping test results, and water quality data. Our analysis have indicated that the deeper Port Rec 1 well may achieve 1 to 2 million gallons of water per day. And this is a lot of water for the town. And this would be enough water to get off MDC and be able to be water independent. Now, we have a full report. I'm happy to share this with whoever would like to see it, but the water quality is good. The output is great, particularly with the deeper well. We drilled 2 wells. One was about 330 feet. The other was about 100 or 237 feet, or 179 feet, excuse me. And the deeper well, the 337 feet well, was viable. And so we will be expecting a full report from GZA as far as next steps go. But we're very, very much encouraged. The water quality was great. The
So
only.
No remediation?
What's that?
No remediation?
No remediation. The only thing that they said is that the water's a little bit hard, so we would have to have some, like a water softener. But other than that, I have and I'll pass this around if you guys would like to take a look, but the water quality shows as far as all of pesticides, non-detectable, PFAS, non-detectable, metals, all below where we need to be. Everything's below where we need to be. So this is really, really good news for the town. So I wanted to share that with everyone, and more to come on this. But so thank you to Ryan and GZA, and we're excited about that. So we're going to keep working with GZA to make sure that we can make this a reality. That's all I have under communications and correspondence. So I'll open it up to public comment. Is there anyone that would like to comment? It's here in the audience. Hey, Lou, would you like to come up?
Hey, Lou.
For the record, my name is Lou Pear, 227 William Street. Tonight, I would like to share some insights to the school facilities report, which our committee spent 2 years investigating cost analysis, review of several options, and demographic projections. In doing so, an architectural firm was hired as a consultant. A demographic report was presented, and 2 groups of engineers rendered the need for capital improvements for the elementary schools. That's where we started. In the previous School Facilities Committee report, chaired by Sharon Peters, the recommendations were: Brownstone Intermediate School should stay open. 2, the modular classrooms at Valley View should be removed, and they are gone. A design consultant should be hired to explore potential ways to replace the space lost and the demolition of the modular classroom. So I think that predicated the things that our committee needed to do, to address. So this committee met, but no action was taken. Brownstone was left open. 6 years later, a committee was formed to address what the previous committee asked us to do. So that's where we were 2 years ago. And thank you to the Board of Selectmen that said resolution to choose a committee of residents, Board of Selectmen members, Board of Education members. We've had a superintendent on the committee, a principal on the committee, 2 teachers on the committee. So it was a well-diverse group of people that had the best interest of the community in mind. In our current School Facilities Committee report, a majority of its members voted to decommission Gildersleeve, renovate Brownstone and Valley View as new, and add classrooms at the Valley View for grades 2 and 3. Charles and I led some focus groups, some 20 focus groups, to survey administrators, teachers, school staff, Democratic Town Committee, Republican Town Committee, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, and members of several focus groups for residents and parents. The feedback to renovate and add to Valley View was a separation from a lower elementary school for students from upper elementary school would be accomplished. It would be palatable for the community to close 1 school, but closing 2 schools may be too much. 1 large elementary school would exceed 750 students, the largest proposed elementary school in the state, in one of the smallest towns in the state. The availability of land for a 750 student school, in my opinion, is not large enough for parking some 90 staff cars, adequate playground space, scheduling for special area teachers, and an overcrowded cafeteria. So if you should go forward tonight with a resident survey, what happens to our facilities committee report? So,
Thank you, Lou.
thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
Is there any additional public comment? Anyone who would like to comment in the audience? Is there anyone on the chat that would like to comment? Don't see anything. Okay, there's always a second public comment at the end of the meeting as well. So we will move on to our monthly report from the Committee on Solidarity. I don't know if anyone is here with us this evening. And I know Mike is the liaison, and we may have to table our monthly report from the Committee on Solidarity. So we'll move on to the second item under old business, which is the continuation of discussion on the School Facilities Study Committee report, as Lou just alluded to during public comment. And I will say, Lou, that the work that you did on the committee and that Facilities Study Committee group did, and the work that Dr. Britton did as well, it's right here. It's not going anywhere. We're not doing, we're not discarding any of the work that you guys did, and you did a terrific job on that. And so this board now has we discussed it at our last meeting when we met in July, and we didn't have everyone there at the last meeting. Unfortunately, Mike Hernandez couldn't be with us this evening, but we're going to go on without him because this is important, and we need to kind of figure out the next steps with this facilities committee. I will tell the board that I worked on and wrote up a resolution for your entertainment on creating a land and building usage assessment committee, which is in your packet that you can take a look at. And we can talk about that after, but I thought it best to continue the discussion that we had the last time and kind of see where everyone's thoughts were as far as what the school facilities committee reported as their recommendation, and what you feel are the next steps to move our plan, whatever plan we go with, forward. So would anyone like to go first?
Yeah, I just have, I know I wasn't here the last meeting, and these questions might have been addressed, but I just have a question for Charles, if you could.
Hello.
How you doing? When we had the joint meeting up at the high school in the auditorium, we discussed a few things. One of them was giving up the basement of Biz to the town. It's been several months since that meeting. I've been thinking about that, and at that meeting I asked you, if that wasn't approved, what would that do to our numbers as far as what we would be getting back, a percentage from the state? And you said it would be not good.
Right.
Basically.
It would be, so the formulas the state uses are average daily membership and square footage. So if you were to add a grade to Brownstone, make it, let's say, a 300 student school, which is 456, the state would calculate those 300 students and then how much square footage would be eligible for reimbursement if you were to renovate to new or alter the space. If you added in the basement, you would be way over the square footage, because those of you who know, the basement is sprawling and enormous. Right? So if you were to renovate to new that entire building, including the basement, our reimbursement rate would be reduced from a high of 52% far lower, and you'd have a renovated basement, which we're not using. Right? So part of our committee's discussions with Fryer, and we spoke with the state, would be to say, hey, let's not put any money into renovating a basement that we don't need and we're not using as classroom space. I mean, why have a beautiful new basement that we wouldn't be using and would reduce our reimbursement rate? Would we be able to sort of divide the building, turn that over to the town and say, the town uses that space, the school uses the classroom space, that would then enable us to renovate to new that space that we would be using and thereby maximize our reimbursement rate. That was a sort of a clever way to look at it. It's something that we spoke with the state about. They said we could do it, and by doing that, we would then, again, maximize our reimbursement rate and only be renovating those areas that would be used as instructional space. It wasn't only the basement, it was also the auditorium, right? So, as you know, there's an auditorium that is many, many square feet. Part of what you see in the report is our recommendation that it wouldn't make a lot of sense to renovate to new a lot of the instructional space and leave the auditorium not renovated. So part of our recommendation was to include the auditorium as part of that renovation, but that then also lowers our reimbursement rate from 52% down to around 46%. There was discussion about whether you peel that off and do it as a capital project or not, but I think as part of our discussion, the committee kind of came to the consensus with input from a lot of people that, hey, it doesn't make sense to do a renovation and not do the auditorium as part of that, but it certainly would make sense to not renovate a basement that's not going to be used as part of instructional space in the school.
But could we not renovate the basement for instructional use while still having it part of the Board of Ed, part of the school? As a mechanical, right? Basement's a mechanical room. I'm just worried we're gonna get into a position like we've gotten into before where we're overbuilt.
Right.
And it comes back after you're gone, after the facilities committee's gone, and we have to, the townspeople now are on the hook. What do we have to do?
Right. Yeah, and we know that's Portland's experience, right? That you know, sort of there's, what we're gonna be very careful about is, Fryer is still working with us, and we're in very close touch with the state department, the Department of Administrative Services, that we're gonna make sure that we're asking permission, not forgiveness, the whole way through this, so we don't get caught in the same type of situation that was with the secondary school where the town was asking for forgiveness rather than permission. When we submit our grant applications for reimbursement, assuming we get to that point, we will have been in very close touch with the state so that they're clear with exactly what our goals will be and what square footage will be reimbursed, so that any reimbursement we get matches what we do and is above board and clear to everybody.
So when you're going to submit those, I just wanted to get this clear in my head, is when you go to submit those numbers, that's going to be well before we know what we need to bond.
So if the timeline that's in the report calls for a couple of things, right? That it asks the Board of Selectmen to form a committee to explore what would happen with decommissioned schools.
Correct.
It also calls for me, and I've already been working on this, as a matter of fact, just this past week I visited South Windsor and have spent a lot of time this summer familiarizing myself with what are called education specifications reports. So it calls on me and my team to develop an education specifications report that's shared with the Board of Education and ultimately approved. There will be a lot of input from Fryer architects into the design of that education specifications report. That education specifications report is then used by Fryer to give us the real numbers, right? Because the numbers that are in the report now are ballpark, right? I think they're pretty close, within 10% above or below, but they're not what we need to move if we got to a point where we were asking for a bonding measure. We really need to nail down those numbers, and Fryer has told us right along that 10% difference is going to be reflected in what you ask for in the ed specs report, knowing that we're not going to ask for extravagant things, but we could, right? So we're going to have to design that ed specs report in a way that enables Fryer to give us numbers that we can then use to do two things: form the basis for a grant reimbursement that would need to go to the state by June 30th, and of course a bonding referendum. So we have a lot of work to do still with that education specifications report to make sure it's up to snuff so that it can actualize our curricular programs, but also give us the numbers in terms of prevailing rates for renovate to new and construction, and that work would need to be done throughout the course of this year. So what I'm hoping would happen if we matched up the timeline that we have articulated in that facility study report, is that my team and I begin the process, which we already have, of designing an education specifications report, concurrent with the work of a committee exploring what would happen with decommissioned municipal buildings, that I'm hoping at some point late fall, the Board of Education would be looking at approving the education specifications report that would then be turned over to Fryer to have them take a look at and come back with renderings and looks at that report and dollars and cents to make that report a bricks and mortar reality, right? Assuming everybody is comfortable with the numbers and what's in the report, that would then form the basis for the grant application that would be due to the state by June 30th and would serve as the basis for a bonding measure that currently would, in a very reasonable but still aggressive time frame, might show up as a measure in the November presidential federal election. So that's sort of the timeline we have envisioned, and that's kind of.
So
how
when
we'll
it's
work.
sent into the grant, after everything's brought to fruition with Fryer,
Correct.
and you submit those numbers for the grant,
Correct.
then you'll know if you're gonna be able to use that space, taking away that space legitimately,
Correct.
so we're not in trouble.
Yeah, because what we would be
And then
right.
we would use a real number then, whether it's yes or no, on what we would need to bond.
Exactly. And as part of that, certainly we could write an ed specs report that has us renovating the basement, but I don't see that. I don't think that we would need to do that because,
But do we need to, this is where I'm a little confused on. If we don't need to renovate it, why can't we just say we're not renovating it? If it's not classroom space, if it's not educational space, why can't we leave it as it sits?
If it's still assigned to the Board of Ed, it's still counted as square footage.
right, we need to get it out of our purview.
Okay.
We need to sort of, and Fryer was very good about it. They gave us some examples. There was a place in East Haven that did this. And what the state has said, and Fryer's advised us, is that if we do that, yeah, we have to put a door in there and be very clear that past this threshold, it is town use, and over here is school use. We have to be very clear about dividing that. And it's uncommon. It's not something that has been done often in the state, but the state recognizes that we don't want to use a basement for classroom space for fourth grade classrooms. Town could use it for storage or other types of things. And yeah, there's going to be a dated old basement and a beautiful new part of a building. It'd be a little awkward, but it's a basement, right?
Nobody's
And
gonna see it.
So Bobby answered, I didn't realize that, no matter what, as long as you had it, they just,
They lump it.
whatever it was gonna be used for, they considered that.
They considered
Cruised.
that in the auditorium, that was too much square footage. And as long as the Board of Ed still has access to it, it's considered their square footage.
Correct. And that's why if you add in the auditorium, we're over, right? And that being over reduces, and you see it in the report, the reimbursement from 52% down to, I think it's 46%. So there is that ding, but again, we're going to be very clear about that and transparent up front. So we're asking permission, not forgiveness, so that when the Department of Administrative Services reviews the grant, it won't be a surprise to them. Fryer's working with us and we're informing them. But when they take action to approve that, they're understanding you're over, and it's not going to be a surprise $3 million, we're not paying you bill for the town after this whole thing is done. We will be very clear up front, so we're not getting our hands slapped in the future.
So I have a question with regards to the same area. And excuse me, I haven't been down that end in ages, so I can't recall how it figures out, but I know that the Board of Ed approached Kids Blast and has pulled classrooms from Kids Blast use. Are those classrooms that are now going to be used by a program for the schools inside this area that we're talking about?
Right, so what there's one classroom down, you should take a walk down there. It's it's a good visit. There's a lot of history down there. I mean, it's a large, old
I had years ago,
IA
but I just
shops
don't
and things.
remember.
There are 2 classrooms right now that have historically been used exclusively by Kids Blast. We've reclaimed one of them, I believe hopefully temporarily for 1 year, to get our new 18 to 22-year-old transition program off the ground. That's going to buy us time, but we're very much looking to maybe rent new space or work in new space potentially through a renovation. I don't think that the space is going to house that program, which is really for 6 adult students, 18 to 20 adults. They're not students anymore. They're our responsibility as students from 18 to 22-year-olds and 1 teacher. Again, I don't see that as the permanent home for the program. We actually, as a matter of fact, initially had hoped it would be right here, right down below us in this part of the building over here where youth services is. That's initially what we had our eyes on, but that didn't work out. So we had to find a home for them for at least this year. Going forward, I don't think that's going to be their permanent home base.
Is that classroom in the footprint we're talking about? The one that-
It is not, no.
Okay.
Our goal is that would be
No,
excluded.
I know it may change down the road, but I'm talking about right now, if that's room, is that in that footprint of, that we're questioning where a door is gonna have to be?
Right.
put?
The only part of that is included in the suggestion is the basement has the cafeteria and the gym. Those would be the only 2 areas that we wouldn't turn over to the town. We would need a cafeteria and a gym. They would be renovated to new, but those 2 classrooms that last year were used by Kids Blast, this year are being shared with Kids Blast in the transition program. All of that over would be doored off and locked and part of town and not part of school.
So, wait, so the classroom that was Kids Blast that you are using this year, that would be turned over to the town?
Correct.
Okay. So if you need it this year, then why are you having it turned over to the town?
In the future, that we would turn that over to town. We're gonna.
Where would that classroom then go that you're using this year, I guess?
We're gonna have to find a new space for it.
Okay.
We're actively looking for a new space. Again, we had hoped that this space here in this building was gonna work out. When it didn't, that's where we're putting it. You know, I think in the future, we're gonna wanna find a different space for it based on the nature of the program.
Which program are we talking about?
It's the 18 to 22-year-old
Yeah,
new
okay.
transition.
And you wanted that here in Town Hall? Or in the Buckthorn?
Correct. We were hoping
Got
to
it.
use the youth services room. It's a very
Got it.
specialized program.
Okay.
The classroom space, believe it or not, isn't used all that often. Most of the time, the individuals in that program are out in the community working and, you know, being part of our community, because they're adults at this point. The research says to us that generally those types of programs, you want to get them out of schools because, you want to create that bridge to the working life of adults who need to learn those life skills. But right now, we're in a pinch, so we're going to use it for the short term as Dawn and our special support services might look to rent space or find spaces in the community at large.
Anyone else? I have a couple comments. So to Lou's point, certainly I know that they did a great job, everyone that worked on it. And we're not, I think my thoughts of looking at other things like this survey that we've talked about, we get one shot at this. There is not a second shot, because 3 years later, as it is, I can tell you right now, whatever numbers you have mean nothing in terms of cost, because of what we've seen in the region, or nationally for that matter, in terms of like the project in Cromwell, where it's, we're talking 20 and 30% increases in whatever estimated costs are. So I know we've talked about the idea of, well, maybe you'd use some of that funding to try to do the high school, middle school, whatever you save, over time, you'd use that money to try to do this. I'm really worried that, and I said that the last time, is I don't see a second vote. So if you cannot redo the middle school and high school complex using some way of using the money you saved, there won't be a second vote on a bond. There's no way it would pass, I would think, in this town. So you get one bond vote, and it's going to be larger than you've probably been talking about because of what's going on with construction. So along with that, talking about trying to figure out what you do with the school that you may close and how that may factor in, I mean, it's all got to be a piece of it. And when I talked about the idea of a survey, when I've talked with Ryan about it, it's, you want to get a really good sense. And I know you obviously did 20, I mean, you were out there, and I know how tough that was. So you covered a lot of ground. But it's just whatever data you could get back coming in that gives you a sense of whether the community would support a large bond vote. That's, I'm not saying, no, we don't do whatever your approvals are. I'm just saying, if we could get more data that tells us it'll be good on the vote, because again, you don't get another vote. It doesn't happen. And 3 years later, the numbers will be just phenomenal. So we got to make it work. We got to get that vote passed on the first try. So that's why I look at the sense of doing some sort of a survey, just to get, it's more data points to get a sense of where you might be.
But I think the survey we talked about is a necessity, but I think it has to be done in conjunction with education. We have to educate the townspeople, and that's why the work that this committee did is huge. And my concern with other ideas floating out there now is that it potentially can muddy the water. You have a 2-year study with a lot of fine detail that was done by a large group of people that have a lot of experience in education. And I really think that needs to be the foundation for the discussion. If we start changing that platform, the discussion's going to get muddy. And I think we present to the folks what the report says with the questionnaire, and the feedback we get from that begins to gel into something. But I'm fearful that if we let that conversation head down the road before we get out to the public, there's going to be more confusion than understanding in this issue.
Can I ask the board a question? So you all we've watched the presentation, we've read the report. Does anyone tonight feel comfortable with the recommendation as it's presented in the report?
With closing just one school?
With the proposal as it is, as it was recommended from the facilities committee. Are we at the point where we feel comfortable with this? Or because I'm seeing the need to gather more information, that I don't know if this body is comfortable running with this plan yet until it seems like we get more feedback from the general public.
Well, what I was saying is I believe that report, I'm not necessarily saying to run with the report, but I believe we have to set a foundation for the discussion somewhere. I think that report is the foundation for the discussion. I mean, it was 2 years worth of work in there. There's a great amount of information in there with all the links and the attachments. We hired a consultant, the group hired a consultant, all the information is there. And I think questions that are going to be asked by the public, you can point to that report and answer those questions. From there, that's where I feel this education is critical. From there, people may come with questions and some ideas may spin out of things, but I believe that's the point, that's the item to start this discussion with.
I mean, keep in mind, from that study, I agree with where they landed. I mean, I lean towards 2 schools, but I think the 1 school is more realistic that it would pass. So I believe that's a good plan. But there's 7 of us. There's 6,000 people that vote. So you talked to how many? A couple hundred when you did those. So again, it all goes down to I just would feel more comfortable if I saw some people. It has nothing to do with what I personally believe about that study. It comes down to I want to make sure that it's a successful vote on what's proposed by the study, and that's why I raise it.
So the way I see it, and from talking with residents in town, watching and attending the meetings, is that we currently have 3 groups in town. You have the group which recommends that what the facilities report says, we should close 1 school, add on to Valley View, and refit the biz to new. Now we have another group that would like to close Gildersleeve and the biz and add on and expand on to Valley View and have 1 single elementary school and 1 real campus for the schools of Portland. And then you talk with some people, and they would just like to keep things the way they are and just fix what we have. And so the way I see it right now is that whatever decision that we end up going with, two groups are not going to be happy. And so the more information that we can have as far as what are the largest groups, the better that we can, as Ralph said, get something that's going to pass at referendum, because ultimately we all know that we have to get this through. And so we need, in order to do that, we have to give the town what it wants.
And we gotta remember, we still have outstanding repairs we need done, the middle school and the high school, which aren't going to be cheap. So are we thinking of that's get tacked onto the bond too? Or we, I mean, so we can't put that in the rearview mirror, because by the time this gets bonded, this gets built, it's gonna be another one. We're gonna be asking for another bond or more money, and in the meantime, look, there's more. I understand this is a big thing we need to do in town. This is important, but we have water program coming up. We have other infrastructure. There's some work we need to do in the sewer plant. So we got to be careful how we, wrap our heads around this, because it's a lot of money that we're going to be looking at, and we want to make sure, like Ralph says, we do it, we put it out there, it's comfortable, people vote on it, and we can get going as soon as we can.
I think we're all saying the same thing. I mean, this is going to be the most consequential decision we've made in town in terms of dollars, in terms of changing the nature of the school systems we have, the town itself. If we close two schools, we now have two additional properties that other things can be done. So there's a lot of moving parts. For me, I lean toward this two schools, but I understand the pragmatism of one and why that's appealing. But I think what I would need, and I think all of us probably want, is real clarity on, if it is going to be schools, what is the clear purpose of the other schools? What would actually be what we're doing? What are the costs? I mean, having those as nailed down as possible, even given the factor that it's going to change. If it's a year or two delay, things will go up. But I think that clarity will be real important because all three groups, if everyone is educated from us and from others about exactly what the purpose would be for Gildersleeve in that area, and Brownstone if that's another school, I think it'll go a long way to securing whatever vote that we feel is the best interest, not only the town, but everybody. Those without kids in schools probably have a slightly different opinion than those that are coming into town with their kids. So we won't keep everybody happy. Someone's going to be, regretting it. But anyways, it's very so I need that clarity, and I think that's something that if we can use more feedback from our residents and gather more up. But more importantly, the committee that gets formed to investigate the building use, I think that is going to be key to all of this. And the sooner we can do that, the better. So that's what I would need.
And honestly, Ryan, what you just touched on, the buildings that we were going to mothball. I mentioned at the last meeting that unfortunately the town doesn't have good history in that area. No. We had Central School, now the town hall, that sat vacant for close to 20 years, to the point where the roof was falling in. It was a mess, and that's why I'm looking at the recommendations where we talk about establishing that committee, and I think that's critical. If we take the time and energy, and the voters decide they want to spend a little more and they want to go for everything on one campus, now we have two buildings that potentially we got to find something to do with, or they're going to sit and they're going to waste away. And I remember the main reason that Central School at the time began to come apart at the seams is because they shut the heat off. And that the heat and the electricity are two of the savings is we're looking at here. So there's a lot of issues, a lot of components here, and that's why I really think the report as it stands right now, whether people agree or don't agree with it, it answers a lot of the questions and it's food for thought. And I really think that if we use this as a basis for discussion with questionnaires, I think you'll begin to see those three groups you're talking about, Ryan, coalesce. You may find that a couple of them say, okay, that I don't want to spend that money, or
as Lou mentioned earlier, and that's quite honestly, I'm leaning towards a 2 only because in my mind, I know, I grew up in the neighborhood, I know the size of that hillside, and I know what we have to add on. And when Charles, in the previous meeting, when you said you mentioned it too, Lou, we would be the smallest town in the state with the largest single elementary school. Just the parking alone that has to be there, and it's a hillside, so there may be some that's usable and some that's not. It just lends itself to another problem. But I think that all that was discussed and all that is in this report, and for people to get a good understanding, to begin to get their juices flowing on how we move on this, I think this is the right thing to present, to start the conversation.
So, I'll just say that after our conversation the last time, I did start doing some research as far as research survey companies and those, because it seems like there's consensus on the board. I know Mike's not here this evening, but he expressed similar concerns to me that we do need to gather more information from residents to make this board feel comfortable. I know the facilities committee certainly did their due diligence, and I don't think they could have worked any harder and had any more focus groups than what they did. They worked very hard to get to that point. But I think that this board needs to get to a certain level of comfort ourselves before we can consider finalizing an option that would end up in a referendum on a ballot. So I did reach out to 3 different research survey companies, one of which is Great Blue Research out of Glastonbury. One is DKA Advertising out of Bloomfield. And then there was a third out of New Haven, but they passed on the project. What they did wasn't exactly the same. So I'm working on getting quotes for this board, and I'd like to have a recommendation for you at the next meeting. But I want you to know that this is not, both these proposals that I currently have, and you're welcome to look through them, they're not cheap necessarily. I mean, we're talking roughly, and what I said is I would feel comfortable having a postcard go to every registered voter in town, because I feel like that's the only way. Not everyone is on social media, not everyone is online, not everyone, believe it or not, reads the River East on Friday. So we need to figure out a way to reach these people so that when they go to the polls and there's a big bonding referendum on the ballot, they're not saying, what the heck is this? And so that's what I think. I do think it's worth it. We're talking probably about $20,000 to do a full research survey. One of the quotes I have here is about $16,000, or $15,000, but that didn't include a mailing. And then the other one that did include the mailing was about $20,000. So in order to do that, it may be, and this board can consider the use of contingency funds for this. I do believe that at the end of the day, this has to get funded, and contingency is one option to fund that. I wouldn't recommend any additional ARPA funds in case we go over on our infrastructure projects at this time, before those bids come in. So I don't know, I'll open it up to discussion knowing that, and I would like to share these proposals with you. There's more work that needs to be done, certainly. We could also actually go out to bid for this as well. I just don't know if we went out to bid, the timing. We need to get the results somewhat quickly, so I don't know how much.
I'd just be curious, their proposals, is it predominantly data gathering? Or, because a lot of this, a survey isn't going to be worth the hill of beans if the people don't understand the issue, the fine detail of the issue. And if that's what they're doing, if they're going to put together a real detailed explanation of the report and the findings and ask the questions, then it's worth the money. But if we're still going to have to go out and do all kinds of sessions to explain this process, then I'd have to think twice.
So the way I understand it, and I've had phone conversations with both of these groups, is that I would expect myself, Dr. Britton, members of the Board of Education, probably Laurel as chair, we would work together to help, both of these companies specialize in market research gathering. So they can tailor surveys to exactly what we're looking for, as well as inform throughout the process.
That's,
So-
that's, the inform is the piece that worries me.
And this is, both of which will help us achieve those goals, and, you know, I'm told, but we still need to do more research. I need to do more on that as well, but I do, talking with both companies, I feel like, an example is the town of Hebron. They used this DKA for, and I spoke with Andy Tierney, their town manager over there, and he expressed even though he didn't like the results of the survey, he was very pleased with the job that they did in researching, gathering. They ended up getting about 800, I think, residents that responded to the survey. And so I've also been concerned that when you have a survey, you could have people potentially spamming that online and maybe submitting it more than once. So we talked about having individual unique codes that residents would be able to enter to make sure that they got one vote or one option to enter that survey. So we did talk about that, and you know, there's more, I think more to come, but if you are interested in exploring this, you know, we can certainly bring someone next time after we kind of find a single company to choose from.
I think we have to start looking into it a little more seriously, and once you do some more research, if you want to recommend someone and then have them come in, or
Yeah, I think we should move by the next meeting, by our first meeting in September, in order to get this going. We don't have a lot of time. I know Charles would like this done by October, right, to know where kind of we're headed.
Well, can I just mention a couple of things? I think getting feedback is always a good idea. I mean, builds transparency, gets feedback, and raises people's awareness, right? Two things, two comments. It's interesting, when our committee was doing this, we initially, when we talked about it, said, well, let's do a survey, right? But very quickly we realized, hey, how do you ask a question? Should we keep 3 schools? Should we have 2 elementary schools? Or should we have 1? Without providing the type of context and the numbers behind those things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we decided to do the focus groups, because the focus groups gave us the opportunity to present, inform, and then gather feedback. Right now, I'm sure that these marketing groups can help make sure that people are aware of what they're giving their opinion on, but that's hard, right? How is that going to happen? And then the other piece, so it was interesting because that conversation happened on our committee, and we decided to go the focus group way as opposed to the Survey Monkey or Google form kind of click the box, Likert scale type of thing. So certainly I agree, providing information and context prior to people selecting something, right? Because one of the things we found is that when we said to people, hey, for those of you who think keeping 3 schools is a good idea, here's how much it will cost, $35 million, $32 million, to upgrade or do the work that needs to be done on them, which is subject to 0 reimbursement from the state because that's considered deferred maintenance by the state. Very quickly people went, ooh, hey, if you could turn $35 million into $70 million with state reimbursement, obviously that now starts to make more sense and inform my opinion about penny wise or pound foolish, right? The second thing is, if I were going to grade, and I've graded a lot of papers, that report I gave you, I'd give it an incomplete, right? Because you're right, the big question we couldn't answer when I would say to people, all right, hey, it may not make sense to have 3 elementary schools. If you can maximize state reimbursement, leverage $30 million into $60 million, and upgrade fewer facilities, plus all of the overhead, which generates very long-term savings in infrastructure and salaries and benefits that you're paying, people quickly realize that. But then in every focus group, somebody asked me, what's going to happen to the decommissioned school, right? And my answer was, pass, right? That was, and I see that on your agenda tonight. That's why I give that report an incomplete. And I wonder if even before you did the survey, some work has to be done on what would happen to a decommissioned school, because I know this town well enough to say that 2 things leave bad taste in people's mouths who have been here a long time. 1, overbuilding, and getting your hands slapped, when you do that, based on the experience of overbuilding at the high school, middle school, and then two, as you said, a boarded up building in the middle of your town for 20 years, right? Every focus group I was in, somebody brought those two things up, often in the context of, hey, Charles, did you know this happened to the town? And I was like, oh, yes, I'm well aware of that. And what are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen again, right? So I think those two things need to be considered. What would happen to a decommissioned school, or two, right? And then also, how do you ask the question in a way that informs people so they can make an informed opinion about what's happened? So I think the survey is a great idea. I'm wondering about the timing of it, but I also just want you to hear me say that agenda item that you have on here with the committee to study the possibility of what happens to decommissioned municipal buildings is essential, and might move that report from incomplete to a more gradable, to a more explainable thing, because nobody wants to live with a blighted school in their backyard. Right? I think we would owe it to a lot of people.
I did too.
And
Next door.
Right. So both of those things are great ideas, and hey, moving those two things forward, getting feedback, and having that committee investigate those things. I think, which comes first? I'm not entirely sure. I would think as part of the survey, people would want to know, hey, if I checked the box that said reduce from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1, I would also know what would happen to the other ones that are kind of left standing.
But you can also, and I think talking with both of these companies, and again, I'll have to get at least a third, but we need, they had mentioned asking upwards of maybe even 40 questions, and so part of what to do with Gildersleeve or what to do with Biz can be asked in the questions. Would you support the closure of Gildersleeve if it was turned into residential housing, or if it was turned over to the town for Parks and Rec, or, and all of those kind of questions, we can tailor, I believe, the survey to kind of hone in on that, whether or not we have a definite use for the building or not, because I think, whatever that building usage committee decides, there's probably going to have recommendations, but they're probably going to be just like the facilities committee, where they're maybe split 5 to 4 on what to do with Gildersleeve. And so I think it'll be interesting just to get that input from the town. 5 to 3, excuse me. Excuse me.
One person changed it, could have been even.
But yeah, I think that's the challenge is the timing, because I don't know how fast a new committee trying to do an evaluation. I mean, I know I've heard things thrown around like it may cost $3 million or whatever if you were to demolish Gildersleeve.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you better have a solution of what you're going to do to backfill that money. I mean, if it's a wash and you cover it and sell it or whatever, and you come out zero and you don't have you're not paying anyone to be on that property anymore, then maybe it works. But you gotta come up with that answer, and it's tight to think we're gonna be able to make the timing of like you have October is what we talked about, right? It's a critical time frame, right? So you're talking about turning a lot of things, a survey and an evaluation by October.
Right. The timeline recommended in the report, it's written on paper, not stone. More time would be needed. We tried to say, what would be an aggressive but reasonable time frame? The deadlines for us in terms of grant applications to the state is June 30th, right? So we were told by the Department of Administrative Services, you submit for your grant by June 30th, and you find out if you got it before the following December 31st, right? So just know that if we don't get to the June 30th, 2024 deadline, we're then out to the June 30th, 2025 deadline, so that we get on their priority schedule. So when we looked at our recommendations, we said, hey, June 30th, 2024, if we have a fully vetted out ed specs plan lined up with numbers that make sense from Friar and community support behind this, ready to move on this, we would have to submit our application June 30th, and then we were trying to line it up with the November 7th federal election, so that bonding application goes in June 30th, hopefully positive referendum November 7th, And then we'd hear back by the following December from the State Department of Administrative Services if we got the bond. Now, that's, like you said, a aggressive timeline still, even though it seems like June 30th, 2024 is a ways away. With all of this work that would need to be done, specifically, what do you do with a decommissioned Gildersleeve? If we don't get that June 30th, 2024 deadline, it just means we're a year out, right? And all I'm going to mention is that back to the Fryer Sightlines report, they identified $28 million worth of work bonded in 1 to 3, 4 to 7, and 8 to 10 year timeframes. We're already past the 1 to 3 timeframe, and the buildings are still wearing down, right? I mean, I wish Bob were here to talk to you, or Carl could come and say, I think we're in a, if we don't do anything at Brownstone, Valley View, and Gildersleeve to address some pretty significant infrastructure problems, I'm thinking 5 years before we start to see some systems failures that could compromise our ability to continue to run those without emergency repairs.
So with the time frame how it's laid out, you're writing the ed spec and we're asking the town, or we're asking the state, this is our plan before the question even goes to referendum.
Correct.
So what if you submit everything, it goes to referendum, and the vote is no?
Then obviously, what you ask for in referendum is the full amount, right? If that's passed, and then the
If it
grant,
passes, it moves forward, but if it's no,
and the grant is no, then clearly you change course. But what I've been told by Fryer and the state is that if we do this the right way, I don't want to say it's a rubber stamp, but they're well aware of us. Like they've already been on site and visited us. We've had several visits with people from the Department of Administrative Services, though there's been a lot of turnover there, as we're aware from the news and things. We're not going to put ourselves in a position where that happens. Fryer won't let us fail. Fryer, that's part of the reason why it's helpful to have Fryer, is they're not going to. It's never happened in the state, I'm told, that an application goes in and a bonding referendum passes and the application is denied, and it's not going to happen. I mean, it's just, that would be a headline that we can't let happen. And that's our work, right? That's why we've done so much already. They're well aware of us in Hartford.
no, I'm just wondering if the referendum comes back negative.
Oh, yeah, same thing.
Right. Well,
Then it sets us back a whole nother year, because we have to come up with a new ed spec and a new idea
Right.
and a whole new proposal.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why
And-
Ralph said it's important we do this once, we get it right.
right.
Everyone's educated, just not, I know you guys did a heck of a job on these focus groups, but, focus groups are just a small part of what we have out there. And it's not just, our board, it's to be responsible for, the citizens and taxpayers, but it's also the Board of Education. You guys are responsible for your budget, and, so we don't want to be do something that we shouldn't do.
Right. Agreed. None of this is easy.
No, it's not.
No.
If it was easy, we would have been done
Right.
with these discussions 3 months ago.
I just want to add a couple things. I think, I like the idea of a survey, but I really do think that we have to be really clear about it, because it's survey, beside the cost of it, I think we need to let everyone know, like, if we have 3 situations that we're looking at, I think we're better off having 3 clear-cut reasons, because if you ask them general questions like, what do you think about one school closing? What are some ideas that you have for that school? We probably are in a better position to maybe have a better idea of what the real options are based on what we know as a town about the property and potential interest from other private people that may want to use the property. But I think if we can solidify that first and then be able to go out to people and say, okay, if you choose one school closes, these are the actual costs, this is what it would be in terms of, the tax increase, or, and just more details about that. Because I think that's ultimately going to play out when it comes down to referendum, and they have to vote on it, but the more clear it could be. So I think if we can somehow speed that process up without being not diligent, make sure we're getting all the information we can, gathering it up. So the committee that we're talking about tonight, the sooner we can gather up the detailed options for each one. And then I think a survey soon after that could be more helpful to the town.
That's exactly where I was thinking, Mike, as I'm listening to Charles. I think the survey we need to do, but I think, and in my mind, I know the one piece right here that I really can't lay a timeline on is the work of that building committee.
Right.
Because I think that's critical information. And I mean, it can be a general committee looking at all, how we deal with vacant buildings, but specifically, 2 out of the 3 options involve Gildersleeve, either way. If we can somehow make that committee happen and happen quickly, that information we get from there will be huge in how we present this to the public in a questionnaire. And quite honestly, I think if we put out a questionnaire, it's August. If we put out a questionnaire in November or December of 2023, by election time, a lot of people aren't going to remember it. It may be better that that questionnaire comes out after the turn of the, once we have all this information, the questionnaire comes out after the first of the year, then you know, you have a better understanding of where the budget stands. You hopefully will have a better understanding of what's up with Gildersleeve and the vacant buildings. We'll have some time to figure out and time to present the information in this report, just make it available to the public. And then I'm hoping that by the time that information goes out, it'll be hitting right around the same time when Charles will have all this fresh information to put in that request to DAS and to see where we go. But there's an awful lot of what's going to happen with that building, what it's going to cost us, which way we're going to go, that I think is critical to this questionnaire.
And the other question that gets asked a lot too, we haven't talked about it really tonight, is transition plan. So once a decision's made, the next one is how do you transition from, you know, where we're at now to the end goal of 1 or 2 schools closed? I know I get a lot of questions from parents asking, you know, like, has the town thought about that? So that's another part.
Can I just add one other piece of information, then, I'm sorry, we're going to ask a question, but I just want to bring it up. One number that I'd heard floating around out there in terms of, hey, how much would it cost to demolish Gildersleeve and, you know, make the space available for other uses? A number of the $3 million was floated out there, and that was just something that was brought up at our committee as a possibility. Last week, I went and visited South Windsor and spoke with Kate Carter, the superintendent there, and actually watched the building being demolished. If you ever have a chance, drive through South Windsor and you can see this brand new Pleasant Valley Elementary School they built, and right next to it, you'll see the old Pleasant Valley, if you go right now, with the backhoes there. I asked her, how much did it cost to rip that school out of there? She texted, I think it's Gilbane Construction, I don't know if that sounds right. Gilbane responded back, $975,000. So even that number, $3 million, is, I believe, wildly inaccurate, but I don't know what that real number is. That might be one of the first pieces of information our committee investigating what to do with vacant municipal buildings, specifically Gildersleeve, finds out for real. Because right now, it's all just kind of.
And again, I put that, I don't even know what the number is. I mean, I know we talked about that number, and I just thought, I mean, the bottom line is, it's gonna be a big number, and you just gotta know how you're gonna cover that in order to make that move.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna put one other thing out there, and I know it might not be popular, but this committee obviously did a lot of work and came up with that solution, what they believe is the best strategy. We're talking about, like, we're gonna put out a survey to say, let's look at all 3 examples of what could happen. I mean, maybe really the example is, this is the proposed solution, let's use this, and maybe the other solution is you just renovate all of them. You get in that situation where you look at options on schools and closures, I think it's gonna gray the results coming back. I mean, or you just say, listen, this is the proposal, would you support it? And this is what it would.
That's what I was saying, that's my fear.
I think
But
we're
I
gonna
think you
get.
guys are thinking, what we're talking about isn't like a magic bullet that's gonna say, oh, this is what we should do. What it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, this is where the appetite of the town is. Like, okay, so the way I envision this is it says, okay, so maybe 50 million is the max that we have to bond at referendum. You know, things like that are what we can find out from a survey now without having to wait. Those are the things that we need to take into consideration. A survey can say, well, are people comfortable with, you know, the sixth graders going up to the middle school because we already have capacity today at the middle school? Then we can find that out from a survey today.
Right.
And you know, as far as the uses of Gildersleeve or Biz go, anybody who looks at those properties knows the town has options with what we would do with those buildings. Should we decommission Gildersleeve? I mean, yes, there's a cost to demolish Gildersleeve or to use it, to lease it out to another. I mean, all those options are what this new committee we expect would be looking into. But I don't know, I sort of envision both this committee and the survey happening simultaneously, whereas I don't know if this committee is gonna have any magical answers on what, you know, we should do with Gildersleeve. At the end of the day, it's whether or not the town's going to support a school closure and an addition onto Valley View and the bonding referendum that comes with that. I mean, that's really what we're trying to get at.
My only concern is that if you envision a tree, you can start at the roots and work your way out to the branches, or you can start in the leaves and work your way back to the trunk. I'm trying to present to as many people as possible in this town what this plan is, what the issue is, and trying to drive them all, as many as possible, to a single solution. My fear is if we ask too many different questions, we may end up doing just opposite of what we're trying to accomplish, which is creating more ideas and possibilities instead of bringing everybody to a conclusion.
Well, I think what Ryan was saying is if we just go off of what their recommendation is, right? And then say, this is a recommendation, throw in a couple other questions. The main thing is, what are the taxpayers willing to bond? That's the big thing. And I think that's what's gonna drive Charles in what we can do. If we're going in there and we have nothing and then it shows up on a referendum and we're at 50 million for a bond and it gets voted down and then they gotta go back and you know,
But
backtrack.
this isn't a black and white issue.
No, it's not.
Let me give you another example on a particular question that we could ask, because I heard it come up in the Board of Education meetings, where several Board of Education members brought concerns about turning over that basement portion of the building to the town, and what that would entail for school security, for instance, having a public building and also a school joined like that, and a shared parking lot. So, you know, I see this survey as a way to see if the town would support that and to get that feedback. Also, there were concerns over having the Biz not having a true playground for elementary aged children and being on Main Street, school safety. All of that we can gather from a survey today. These are the things that I think need to inform this board, because we know that no matter what decision is made, not everyone's going to agree with whatever decision we ultimately, and the Board of Education ultimately recommends to the voters. But if we can get at least a consensus what the town is willing to support on all of these little different measures that go into the referendum, I think it makes our job easier when we decide, you know, this is the plan and this is what we're bringing forward. Those are the things that I envision that are still outstanding. We don't really know if the town would support a town building in the basement of the Biz. You know, we don't know that and that's what I'm trying to gather more information on. Also, the other question is, would the town support a referendum, to Ralph's point, without taking care of the middle school, high school? Because as, you know, I do agree with Ralph that coming back to the voters of Portland in 5 to 10 years and say, hey, we need another 30 million, 20 million, whatever, is probably not a viable option for the town either. So this is what's going through my head is, what can we get past? What is the town going to support and what's it not going to support? Because, at the end of the day, we own it. And we have to make sure that whatever we put forward is something that's going to pass. So, I think we'll continue this conversation. I think the next time I'll have I think it would be helpful to have someone from one of these research companies actually come to answer questions on how they would perform a survey like this and what they would be looking for. I think you all brought up some great questions, but I don't have all the answers. To be honest, I still have to go through these proposals in more depth. But I do think it's a starting point for us. And so certainly our next item will be to form this committee on what to do if we did close those facilities. But let me get some more information for you at an upcoming meeting. And as Dr. Britton said, it looks like, we can always delay it. It doesn't have to be in November of 2024. I mean, we want to get it right. If you guys want to wait, I was trying to do this survey and this other committee simultaneously to get to this November of 2024 referendum question.
I don't think there's anything wrong with doing them together. I mean, ultimately, you're gonna do this now, the survey is not gonna impact, what you're doing is collecting data about what are the options, if it's Gildersleeve, what is the option? We're gonna take it down, try to sell it, we're gonna repurpose it to another school program, like our buddies there that rent us space from us now, then make it senior housing, whatever. I mean, whatever the options are, so we have, so it certainly could go. I certainly would support if we looked at creating a committee.
But I
take a look at
still
that.
think we should try our very best to shoot for that federal election. And as I recall, we were doing that for a reason, that is our highest voter
Yes.
turnout.
You're gonna get the
And if
best
you want to
idea.
get the best turnout and get the best opinion, that's the time to do it.
Well, I know, and I'm working backwards. So in order to hit that threshold, we need to have some sense of idea by October. So Charles can write the ed spec report and we can move forward. In order to get that by October, I don't feel like this board is comfortable making any decision without that survey. And so if we're going to wait until that committee does their work, that's going to push us out months as far as, when we would be able to do that survey. And then that's going to delay everything. Like, we need to do both simultaneously in order to hit our benchmarks. That's kind of how I see it. All right. Should we end on that note for now?
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Britton.
We'll move on to quickly reappointments to boards and commissions.
I had to look back at my notes because that was so long ago from the last meeting, but I believe I would like to put Melissa Kelly forward for the library board vacancy that was recently created.
Okay. Motion made. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, John. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next we'll move on to new business. So it's back. We're going to talk about the possible creation of a committee to evaluate municipal properties. I put in your packet a proposed resolution for you. I will read the, or would someone like to read it?
No, I'd like to waive the reading.
You'd like to, well, I think it's important to read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a resolution, Board of Selectmen, Portland, Connecticut, August 16th, 2023. Resolution creating a land and building usage assessment committee. Whereas the town of Portland recognizes the importance of effective and efficient land and building usage for the betterment of the community. And whereas a facility study committee has met over the course of 2 years and provided both the Board of Selectmen and Board of Education with a detailed report that included a number of recommendations. And whereas one of those recommendations was that the Gildersleeve School has reached the end of its useful life cycle and should be closed, and the building either repurposed or demolished. And whereas, before any final decision is made, the Facilities Committee recommended that a second committee be formed to evaluate the potential options should the plan to close Gildersleeve School move forward, knowing that the public would likely not support any potential changes in school facilities with this question unanswered. And whereas the Board of Selectmen is currently working to gather additional public feedback from the community before any final decision is made regarding school facilities, and all options remain viable at this time. And whereas the Board of Selectmen believes that it is in the best interest of the town to also explore potential alternative uses for the properties of Brownstone Intermediate School and the current town hall while an evaluation of Gildersleeve is underway. And whereas the Board of Selectmen recognizes the need to appoint a committee of interested citizens to investigate alternative uses for these town-owned properties before any final decisions can be made, and whereas it is in the best interest of the town that the Board of Selectmen identify this committee's responsibilities and establish procedures for the orderly discharge of those responsibilities, using as guidelines the rules of procedures of the Board of Selectmen and Robert's Rules of Order. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen, pursuant to Section 405, Section 5 of the Portland Charter, hereby creates a Land and Building Usage Assessment Committee consisting of 7 members. 7 members shall include 1 member from the Board of Selectmen and 1 member from the Board of Education and 5 community members. And be it further resolved that the first selectman and town planner shall be ex officio non-voting members of the committee with all rights, duties, and responsibilities accorded ex officio members. And be it further resolved that the Board of Selectmen retain the right to decide whether to replace any members who may resign or be removed for failure to participate in the work of the committee. And if such members are not replaced, the actual number of members shall be those members serving at any given time. And be it further resolved that any committee member who is absent from 3 consecutive meetings without notification to the chair of such or of such sufficient cause may result in the removal of said member from the committee by the Board of Selectmen. And be it further resolved that the committee shall convene an organizational meeting prior to October 1, 2023. And be it further resolved that the scope and direction of the committee's responsibilities shall be, but not necessarily limited to, the following. 1, prioritize the assessment of the Gildersleeve School property, given the recommendation from the Facility Study Committee and its potential for adaptive reuse or repurposing. This includes exploring the cost of demolition as well as potential revenue from the sale of property. 2, conduct a subsequent assessment of the Brownstone Intermediate School or BIZ property, considering its condition and potential for repurposing or redevelopment. 3, consider and evaluate potential alternative uses for the current town hall property should repurposing be considered. 4, develop a detailed report with recommendations for the best course of action regarding the Gildersleeve, Brownstone Intermediate School, and Portland Town Hall, considering social, economic, and environmental factors. Be it further resolved that the committee shall continue to function until such time as the work called for in this resolution is completed, at which time the committee shall notify the Board of Selectmen and the committee shall be disbanded. I want to point out that the reason why I put in about the town hall was a request from the Board of Education. That was not my suggestion, just to be clear.
Okay.
So was someone, so
I'll
that's.
make the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion on this?
Now I
None.
understand why you said this is gonna take forever. This isn't gonna fly if you're trying to get an answer for 2024.
I think when you get down to the bottom where you've got the prioritization, maybe we need to modify this to provide individual deliverables, Gildersleeve being first, BIS being second. Because if your item 4, develop a detailed report with recommendations for the best course of action on all of those, that's gonna take years. You're never gonna get that all done.
Honestly, I think what you need to do is just come up with a best case and worst case scenario. What's Gildersleeve worth with that building on it? What's it worth without the building? What kind of developers would you attract? Boom, boom.
What I'm
Quick
saying
and
is,
simple.
just add one
Same
more
thing
item
with
here to
biz.
prioritize your deliverables.
Right.
They'll first prioritize and deliver their results on Gildersleeve School.
Right.
then we have the information, then they can move on into the next to the BIS. You know, because if you wait and do item 4 and have them provide a detailed report with all the recommendations,
It's gonna be 2
But that's
years.
number
Yeah.
one, that's why I put prioritize the assessment of the Gildersleeve School.
but the
What John is
assessment is
saying,
not a report. Your item 4
Don't
is the
do
report.
all of the buildings,
You-
do Gildersleeve first.
I'm saying
and
do
get it out.
Gildersleeve first and give
Get out.
give an initial report. Then do BIS and give an initial report, then sum it all up. But you're looking for that information specifically on Gildersleeve.
So develop a detailed report after number 1 on Gildersleeve, is what you're suggesting?
I would say, yeah, each one have a deliverable on each item as
Well,
they,
that's
as you
our
go down.
question that we want the answer to, because that's what we're asking with the facilities report, is
Right.
just Gildersleeve.
Right.
But we want the other ones later.
So,
Correct.
so would you suggest, John, that number 4 be modified so that it's develop a detailed report with recommendations for, with the Gildersleeve School, and then put first, followed by Brownstone Intermediate?
I
School?
still feel if that, the way it's written right here, the understanding would be the committee has to go through and analyze Gildersleeve, BIS, and the town hall
That's
before they
what-
give you a
well,
report.
That's what we were asked to do. That's what we were asked.
That's fine, but you're not gonna get the answer you're looking for in the time frame you're looking for. That's my concern.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a valid
You know,
concern.
because what we really want to know about is Gildersleeve. I mean, this is fine. I would just take item 1 and say, you know, based upon the results of the Gildersleeve property analysis, they will provide an initial recommendation, and then after each one, they do that, and then on item 4, then it'll coalesce into a single deliverable report.
Can I just ask, because now Ralph suggested earlier that an option may be between the report that the facility study presented and fixing the buildings and moving on.
Mhm.
Now, kind of what you're suggesting is kind of along the similar lines. Are we thinking that maybe that one elementary school option is something that we don't have time to consider? Is that something that you're thinking now?
What do you mean? No.
No, you mean beyond the one, you're saying.
Yeah, but
We
like.
need to look at Gildersleeve.
We need to
period.
look at Gildersleeve, but I think there's concern, and I think your concern is that this committee may not have the time to look at bids and.
Well, the
town
committee will
hall.
have a time to look at them all, but the way this is written, they're gonna present a report after they look at all 4 options. I'm trying to find this is fine, I'm just trying to find a way that they will look at each one in sequence and present an initial report after each item.
Okay.
Then coalesce into a final report, but if you wanna get the information on BIS, you don't wanna have to wait until they review town hall
No,
before they give it to you.
I agree, but so then how, can you propose how you would change it then?
They should give a report after each building is studied, starting with Gildersleeve
Well,
first.
Yeah, so, but that's what I was trying to say with number 4, develop a detailed report for each course of action.
But John is
Starting
saying
with-
how
Starting
4 is,
with
how 4 is
Gildersleeve.
written, it's grouping them all together.
So, yeah, so, okay.
Your 1, 2, and 3 suggest there's an order because you say a subsequent.
Correct.
assessment. So maybe you just have to add something about a report in each one, 1, 2, 3, because then when you do conduct a subsequent assessment
Okay.
and.
Following this
generate a
analysis, the
report,
committee will
it's
generate
gonna
a
naturally-
They'll have
report.
a separate report for each building.
Yeah, that's basically it. Because I'm fearful that if you're adding BIS, which may be an option, because if it turns out that people want to get rid of it, that is something, information you're going to want to know. But based upon the recommendation from the committee, the one we definitely want to know is Gildersleeve. But the town hall is the outlier. I understand they want to put that in there, and that's good information to have,
Yeah.
but not if we want to make that November 24 deadline.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's my only concern.
Okay, so to modify this then, we would say after 1, and provide a detailed report of Gildersleeve?
Provide a detailed report of the analysis, the Gildersleeve analysis, and move on to item 2. And then after BIS, present a detailed analysis and move on to item 3.
One sentence to each.
Yeah,
Each of
and then-
each of 1 through 3 and 4.
Then 4, the detailed report to include the analysis of all 4 structures.
Got it. Okay, I like that, okay. So after, so number 2, conduct a subsequent assessment of the Brownstone Intermediate School, and then after that sentence, provide a detailed report of the Brownstone Intermediate School.
Yes,
assessment.
do the same with each one, and then at the end, basically say that you're pulling all four of those together into a final report. But then you have the information in the time sequence that you want it.
Right. You're not waiting for every one of them to be done.
Correct. That's my fear, that we'd be waiting for everything to be done before we had the results of this, or Gildersleeve.
Gildersleeve.
Okay. So, Sharon, I'll get you this.
Yep.
So John, just take a look at like my writing here, just so I make sure that we get that.
Yeah, provide a detailed analysis, detailed report of the analysis of Gildersleeve School, and the provide a detailed analysis. Maybe for a detailed report of the analysis of Gildersleeve School, then move on to your next analysis, so that they understand that there's a sequence of events.
It's clear to write the report before you go to 2.
Correct.
And then you write the report before you go to 3.
And you could even say, and present the report to the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Education, or whoever you want to. And then, after you do each one of those individually, then they'll present a full-blown report of all the options. But by that time, you'll have had time to digest and move on with Gildersleeve and BIS.
Okay. So we're good, so.
I'm sorry, guys, that was just my feeling on it.
No, after he read it and I looked over
Yeah.
it again, yeah, we
Yeah.
couldn't jam it up till we waited for everything. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, so we modify.
Yes. As modified by
It was
Ryan.
modified by Ryan.
I'll second.
All right.
And he will present it to Sharon and some.
Sharon, yeah. Any further discussion on this committee? So we now need to get 5. One, we need a Board of Selectmen member, we'll need a Board of Education member, and then we'll need 5 members from the public for this committee. And we want members that will have expertise
Yes.
in this field. So start thinking.
Start.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Leave this up here. All right. Got a lot to get through, sorry, guys.
Not a 2-minute meeting.
The next item is a new number B on the agenda. This is something that I had mentioned that Don Guin had brought to my attention. This is an annual resolution that you need to approve so that we can apply for an emergency management grant. We do this on an annual basis. I don't know if Don is on Zoom. I don't know if Don, you're on the call. If you'd like to say anything about this grant that we applied for? Is he on? I don't want to put him on the spot, but.
Pretty
Yes,
self-explanatory.
can you hear me?
Hey, Don.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. That's the preliminaries for the emergency management grant that is subsidizes the emergency management operations for the town. It's something we have to do every year. Following approval of this request, we will process the paperwork to actually apply for the grant that supports the department.
Thank you, Don. I don't know if we should wait. Why don't you read this while we wait for Ralph to get back? And I think we can wait the meeting. I'd like to.
Oh, this one we can wait?
Yeah, we'll wait.
I have a copy of the grant application too, if anybody would like to review it. Yeah, just real quick.
Drops back.
Hey, Ralph. So, Don was on, he was saying, this is an annual.
Yeah, I
Okay.
kind of sticks in my mind.
We've done this a few times.
Mhm.
So I just need someone to,
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
motion to,
It's authorize you to apply, or what are we doing, applying for the grant?
yeah,
Authorize Ryan J. Curley to apply for the grant.
and waive the reading.
And waive the reading
Yes.
for Bobby.
Okay. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Don.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom.
Don emailed me at about 6 o'clock this evening and said, hey, that's not on the agenda. So we had to get that on. So thank you. Next up is item B, or C, excuse me, which is a resolution contract award for sidewalks. D&P Marias Construction Company. Our Public Works Director, Ryan O'Halpin, is here this evening. Ryan, would you like to come up and just brief the board on these sidewalk projects?
So this sidewalk project is the connectivity grant going from Freestone Ave over to Airline Ave and the bus station at Chatham Court. And that's what we would be awarding, with a section that we had as at alternate 1 for Riverside Street not getting awarded due to resident opposition and Eversource having issues with moving poles over there to make the sidewalks work.
So are we, as far as what we asked for in the grant, the connectivity is still occurring because we're going from the from the bus stop, right, at Chatham Court?
Correct.
So we're covered. My only concern with that was, could we be potentially liable if we didn't finish what we said we were going to finish?
No, so we reached out to DOT to explain the situation, and I posed our problem to them. Is one, on River, so everything came back favorable with the bids, but when it came to Riverside Street, we had 2 factors. We had opposition from residents that did not want, on both sides, on the east and western sides of the street, they didn't want the sidewalks, and because of that, it caused issues with Eversource and placing of the poles. So Ryan and I went out to look at, with Eversource, to look at where the poles would go should we move forward with this project. And Eversource did not have a solution for us because one of the neighbors would have to agree to the pole location.
Oh, God.
So I posed this problem with DOT and I said, look, you know, we could, if you tell us we have to do this because it's the grant, we can do it, but we'd have to still, working with Eversource, we'd have to still find a solution because we don't have one right now. Or an alternative to that was that we could instead take the money and go on High Street from the corner of Freestone and go north, and we estimate we can get approximately to Hall Hill and replace all of the sidewalks. And we suggested that to DOT as a way to connect the town with the schools and better connect. They actually liked that idea better, and they approved us to do that.
So we're catching Chatham Court off of Riverside Street then?
So onto Airline. So
Onto
Airline, yes,
Okay,
but there
good.
would be no new sidewalks on Riverside because of those 2 factors. So,
So as long as, my only concern was that we're still providing that safety factor to Chatham Court.
yeah, so I did reach out to Alan Harrison, the director of our housing authority, and I explained the situation to him. He did not see a problem with doing this because, one, all of the buses go directly to Chatham Court, and we're adding a bus stop as well. So that, he thought, would be a good solution. And explaining that Riverside, he said that he thought that we were okay with this proposal. So I did check on that as well.
Yeah.
But we want you to be aware that that is a change from the original. And we're gonna have to come back to do that ad alternate, because Marias is pricing that up. And next time, when we approve it, we'll know exactly how far we'll be able to go with new sidewalks on High Street, so.
Correct, yeah.
So with that, is there
covered
a
everything.
motion to approve this resolution?
I make a motion, we approve this resolution.
Do you want to read it?
Yes, I'll read it into the record. Resolution, Board of Selectmen, Town of Portland, Connecticut, August 16th, 2023. Contract agreement with DP Moraz Construction Incorporated. Resolved, the Board of Selectmen hereby authorizes First Selectman Brian J. Curley to execute and deliver in the name of and on behalf of the Town of Portland a contract with D&P Moraz Construction Incorporated, 117 Woodland Circle, Ludlow, Mass. 01056, for the purpose of bid number 2024-01, Portland Connectivity Grant Sidewalk Improvements. The total base bid contract amount prior to any required change orders is approximately $387,700.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion on this? Call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next up is item C, right?
D.
D, previously.
Revised short-term, long-term disability plan for town and Board of Ed employees. Now, our town attorney is here this evening, Joe McQuaid. Joe, is there anything, would you like to comment on this? Or I can kind of just give a brief synopsis. Okay, I'll summarize. So the town of Portland has recently changed carriers for our short-term and long-term disability policies from Sun Life to Lincoln Financial. And with that, there was a need to update our short and long-term disability plan to change it to our new carrier. And with that, we looked at some updates to our short-term and long-term disability plan. The big one is that under our old plan, employees were not eligible to go on short-term disability within a 24-month period. And for those of you who don't know, the Family Medical Leave Act requires you to be able to go on FMLA once a year, once every 12 months. So we thought that it was best to update our short-term disability policy to be in line with the Family Medical Leave Act. And so now, going forward, an employee would be eligible for short-term disability once a year. So they would come back from short-term disability, and then they would have 12 months before they were eligible again, instead of the previous 24 months. Did I get that right, Joe?
That's correct.
Cool. All right. And then I gave you in your packet a track changes version of this document, which it's really fun to read. So, but that's really the big, did I miss anything else that's big, Joe?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So, yeah, we have to approve the policy.
I make a motion, we approve the policy.
Short-term and long-term disability.
Short-term and long-term disability policy.
Are you gonna waive the reading?
Yeah, we don't have to read that.
I'm gonna waive the reading, yes.
Now you're gonna have to read it with all the changes.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion on this? I think it's pretty, despite all the track changes, it is pretty straightforward. So I'll call for the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you all. The next item is amendment to the fiscal year 2023-2024 non-union pay plan, ZEO rate increase. You may recall I came before the board about a year ago, and I asked that the pay plan be amended and we increase the ZEO position because it is still unfilled. And unfortunately, we have not been able to fill this position. The town of Portland is not alone. I just had a Council of Government meeting yesterday to discuss regionalization with some of these positions because many, many towns are missing building officials, planners, ZEOs. It's not just the town of Portland, it's everywhere. And it's very difficult to fill a part-time position, this is a 20-hour a week. So there's no benefits to this position. And oftentimes with the ZEO, you're looking for someone who lives outside of town because you're dealing with sensitive zoning matters. And a lot of times, if you do live in town, you may be your neighbors, and there may be complications. It's not an easy job. So my recommendation to the board is that we increase the pay for the ZEO position from, I believe it's 30, let me get the
35.
It was $31.96, I think, and I'd like to increase it to $35 an hour. Basically, we need to do a full court press to get this filled, because right now in our land use office, we have our planner, we have our building official, and we have a consultant and all of these people are ending up doing more zoning related matters, and we need our town planner to be able to focus on planning and higher level things, and we need the ZEO position to take care of those zoning matters. So we really need to fill this position. So that's why I'm asking the board to increase the salary slightly. And we do have the funds in the budget because this position has been unfilled for the past, will be 2 months at least. So that's my recommendation to the board.
So if something came along where there was two other, we'll say one other town came along and said, you want to share or split someone, do we have to change anything we have right now if 35 is our contribution?
I don't think so, no, we could do that. Everything that we've discussed with the Council of Governments it's more theoretical at this point, talking about where we would like shared services and where there's a need. We talked about, Portland doesn't have a dedicated HR department, for instance, and we talked about maybe sharing an HR employee or something like that. Basically, it was just developing a wish list. It was nothing that is coming anytime soon, but we believe, and I believe, regionalization is a good way to share resources and save, money when it comes to these positions that are needed. So certainly we would welcome talk about that. I know a grant writer, for instance, would be a position that I think the town, we've talked about, that the town would benefit from. And I think a shared position would probably be a good way to go about doing that. So different things like that. But right now, we're still looking for our own zoning enforcement officer. So that's what this is about. If you guys agree, you could make a motion.
I make a motion that we increase the rate increase for ZEO from $31.96 to $35 as proposed.
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you. So hopefully we'll get this filled. If anyone's out there who would like to be a zoning enforcement officer, now's your chance.
Not the way you just explained it.
All right. The next item is request for relief of sewer bill with Matt Coronella, and in the amount of $510.99. Thank you for your patience this evening, Matt. It's been a long meeting, and I know. Rick, you're next. So Ryan, I don't know if you want to come up. We do have a recommendation from the Water and Sewer Commission, I believe Jim Tripp, and I think Jim is on the Zoom call as well. I don't know if he wants to add anything, but there is a letter in your packet from our Chairman Tripp. Right, basically, you may recall back on April 19th, this board had refunded Matt due to a leak at the laundromat where for the sewer portion, because the leak, right, did not go into the sewer, it went into the ground, basically, correct?
More than 50% of the
Yeah.
sewer,
Yep.
which wasn't utilized, so I just asked for a discount on that. It carry over into the next billing cycle,
Mhm.
grows the impact carry over. So this is a number that the water commission came up with for that additional fund,
Okay.
just to relieve that.
So real quick, how the number was generated. The original relief was using the average for the past 2 years, the average use for the Portland laundromat. And we ended up relieving about 45% of that bill. So what I did, I took a 28-day average and relieved 45% of that bill, the usage, multiplied by the sewer portion of the bill to come up with the $510.99 that the chairman is asking the board to consider. All the math isn't here with that, but it's consistent with the quarter before. So it was 28 days from January 6th, when the meter was read for the fourth quarter of 2022, and then the leak was found on February 3rd, 2023.
I don't have the minutes in front of me from that meeting, but I thought I asked you, or I asked someone in this meeting, if that was, the calculation we had was the final calculation. Because at our water and sewer meeting, I was present at that meeting when we discussed this. And when we discussed it at that meeting, we were gonna present, or the Water and Sewer Commission was gonna present that final number and look into to make sure they had the billing periods correct when they submitted that number to the board.
Yes, that's exactly how I recall it as well. But I think what happened here
I
is
do as well.
I think there was, because you asked that specific, do we think it's going to carry over into the next quarter? And I don't think it was a definite no. It was I sure hope that it's going to not impact the next quarter, but obviously it appears like it may have indeed impacted the next
So
quarter.
it was April 19th before the first quarter bill went out, and we didn't. It was thought that Matt had caught the leak early enough in the billing cycle that it wouldn't have had an impact, and that ended up not being the case. You know, a month or so after. I think you first reached out back in May, I want to say, Matt.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So that's how we got to where we are.
Yeah. I wanted to make sure that the water had been shut off early in the billing cycle and that the owner did not plan to ask for additional relief.
But this was before the bill came.
Right,
when the bill came.
right, but that's, there's just, I'm just questioning it because we had questioned it at that Water and Sewer Commission meeting to make sure when we presented this, it got presented at the same time. So that's.
Well, that was the hope. We were hoping.
That we were hoping that, so we didn't have to run into this where he had to come back again.
I have a question for Matt. Matt, can you come up so we can talk?
Sure.
Did you pay this already? Did you pay the bill, or is
Every bill that I've been billed has been paid in full.
Okay, so the $510.99, you did pay that So it's not,
Yeah.
there's no interest outstanding or anything like that?
No, it's paid in full. I
Okay.
stopped after the first experience.
Yep.
I felt it was, well, stressful to pay the first bill.
And then,
After I fully understood the impact of everything, I saw absolutely no value in holding the money when it's, because there was an additional hold for you guys on the interest, and we're not gonna charge the interest.
Yeah, that's why I asked, 'cause I remember the last time.
When you
Yeah.
finally wrap your head around it, it gets kind of ridiculous, so, now I fully understand this much better. So, yeah, I paid the bill in full. You know, if it works for the board to help me out, I appreciate it. But, yeah, there was, like Ryan said, there's an additional 28 days of impact from that, after that first bill.
What's everyone's thoughts?
While everyone's thinking, I would just like to state that I would like if we could somehow, when we get these recommendations in the future from the Water and Sewer Commission, we make sure they don't present it to us until they've gone to the second, maybe the next billing cycle, to make sure we're clear, so we don't have, you know, it's an inconvenience for, you know, for our customers.
It would have been, it would have been nice to know that we weren't looking at the full picture yet. you know,
Right.
So we could have looked at it in its entirety.
Correct.
It would be helpful, I do agree. It's difficult when it's on a quarterly basis though, because you don't just have to wait a month. You know,
Right.
You have to wait 3
No,
more
I know.
additional months.
And as I remember, that pictures that hole in the floor and the water you found, it was pretty, I'm sure that there was an urgency to it, so.
Yeah, and I mean, from hearing you out, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. But at the time, I had a pretty hefty water bill, and I was I had a lot of open questions, had no idea what was going on at the time. So in hindsight, I'm much more relaxed about the whole thing, but at the time, it was.
So even on the previous one, you paid the whole water bill, but.
No, I held it waiting for an answer.
No, but in the end, you paid for all the water, and it was
Yes.
just reimbursed for the
Yes.
sewer side.
So for pure numbers' sake, if the water bill is $4,000, I'm paying $5,500 in sewer. So if you think about it, I didn't use that water, all of it, and then I'm paying for a lot of sewer. You know, that's even the ask is much smaller than the impact.
But just for the record, we get the same question from residents who would like to irrigate their lawns in the summer. And so we do need to be careful because some people have asked for a second meter so they're not charged for the water that doesn't go down the drain when they water their lawn and bushes and whatnot. But all of that is baked into the price already. And so we just have to be careful with precedents and I think we talked about that the last time as well. So I just want to make sure that you all recognize that.
I think we talked about this as being within a dwelling as opposed to a watering of a lawn. And I think we thought this was kind of a very unique circumstance.
We did.
At the time.
We did. I know. I just want to reiterate that so when this comes up again, we can point back to it.
Correct.
Yeah.
So water.
Well, I was gonna say that, I mean, we obviously understand the situation. We know when we approved last year's amount for you, this was an error in the sense that we didn't know the full picture. So we're looking to reimburse you. So I'll make the motion that we reimburse you for the $510.99 extra on your sewer portion. That was the unused water that turned into a sewer fee.
And I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries unanimously. John.
John.
Ralph made the motion. All right.
Right. Good night.
Next up. Oh, shoot. Okay.
We're gonna have to take a break.
You gotta keep
We'll
track of who
wait,
hasn't.
sorry, if you wait just a moment longer, apologize for the delay. You just gotta stop drinking so much water here.
First things first.
Shows who the old guys are.
So I gotta sneak up on these
It's
readings.
not even 9 o'clock yet, guys. It's still early.
John, you're not.
For the record, I'm still here.
I'm worried about cycling through another.
Should we do the refunds? While we're waiting? Oh, that's right.
Well, we got a break here.
Oh. Hey, John, do you want to give this to Sharon too while you're up there? Thank you.
Sharon, are you good with the person that I appointed? You have Melissa Kelly at library. Yep. And I don't know, I got a lot of notes for committees I'm gonna have to like.
No, I know. We can put those till next meeting. Yeah.
Let me talk fast, let me talk fast.
All right. No, not at all. Ryan, would you like to come up first with this and explain the situation here? So this is the next item is a request from Rick McGinley, who's here this evening, for the town to take ownership of drainage and detention, pipe and detention basin. So Ryan and I did go out and walk with Rick through this area. So do you want to explain what we're talking about here? I know you provided a map and a survey as well.
So, I guess we can explain how we got to this point where we're coming back up, and that is, this property is for sale on Covell Hill. And on that property is a swale that goes to a sediment pond. The sediment pond then enters a drainage pipe for about 10 to 15 feet, and then enters a town right-of-way through 21 Hilltop, which the town owns the maintenance of that pipe and then the drainage system thereforth. The issue that arose 2 years ago at the end of 2021, when Bob Shea was in my position, was the leaves had clogged up the pipe, and the sediment pond flooded and ended up flooding the property at 21 Hilltop, which then fingers started getting pointed, mainly at the town, because the town didn't have a clear answer as to who had the maintenance of this sediment pond and swale. And Jeff Jacobson ended up doing some research back to 1985 when the Highlands subdivision was made, and Rick had developed the property and found that in some planning and zoning meetings and board meetings, the town had rejected maintenance of the swale and the sediment pond and the drains on the property of the Highlands. So we we had gone back, the town did the cleanup, obviously, and got the leaves out of there, so it got unplugged, so there was, and put a grate on top of the pipe. So there's, fingers pointed back at the town that the town is already maintaining it, but we had to maintain it to prevent it from flooding someone's property, and our pipe is right there. So it's a little bit of a gray area, but the Rick and I had met, and he wanted to present to the board a solution where Rick goes in and maintains this one last time and wants the town to then take over maintenance. The issue I have with that one is just access. If you guys look at the Google map I gave you, it's a tough spot in the woods to get to. It's not very accessible like other sediment ponds that the town owns throughout town for subdivisions. This one, we would have to clear out a lot of trees in order to get back there from either direction, from either the highlands, or we would have to go through someone's property with an excavator, possibly messing up their lawn and needing to repair their lawn on 21 Hilltop, where the easement is for the pipe, and then doing that on a regular basis. At least every year when the leaves fall, all the leaves would need to be cleaned out of it.
So is the part in question from the sediment pond to the 21 Hilltop property, that area where in the woods, is what we're talking about? Because from that point through 21 Hilltop, it's town-owned already, right? So it's that distance from the sediment pond to the back of 21 Hilltop that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, and it would, what we're talking about is not the ownership of the so-called grass swale that was on the plans. I mean, all of it's overgrown with wood, so there would never be a grass swale there right now, even if you tried to plant grass, it gets no sun. So right now, it's just a trench where the water flows down into, a little bigger trench area where this said pond should be. There's no riprap there. It's not really maintained. It's working right now, but it could be a problem once the leaves fall again and they decide to flow down this trench and clog up the pipe potentially. So, looking in the packet at the planning and zoning meeting, there's a paragraph that all still holds true today, which I can read out if you guys want to flip to that. So it's the last page on the packet. It says PZC 3 at top. And it says, during the motion, there was a discussion concerning the maintenance of the detention basins. Mr. Seiferman, which Joe Seiferman was the Public Works Director at the time, indicated that the Board of Selectmen voted to reject the plan as submitted due to liability problems and maintenance costs. Mr. North stated that it would be difficult to require the homeowners to maintain the basins without any standards or guidelines to follow. Attorney Buono stated that he concurred with Mr. North. He also stated that he felt that the town should maintain them for two reasons. The neighbors will benefit from the stormwater management, and that the town generating water which is discharging onto the property from High Street. Attorney Buono further stated that because the town has agreed to maintain detention basins in other subdivisions, it would be spot regulating to deny such for this subdivision. After a short discussion, the commissioners agreed to remove all references to the maintenance of the basins and ditch from the map. So originally, the plans for the subdivision had maintenance going to the town, and that had gotten deleted after this meeting. And then this actually highlights the problem which we have right now is to require the homeowners to maintain the basins without standards or guidelines to follow on what they need to do to maintain that that swale, that basin, and being able to say, this is what you should have been doing the whole time, where Rick was never told anything for years, it wasn't a problem for years, and then it became a problem. And now it's back, 30 years later.
It's 40.
Well, closer to 40, yeah. But either way, yeah, 2 years ago, 35 years later.
So is this just water from the development?
So there naturally, water comes down High Street from the high school, comes down High Street, and then there is, due to probably layers of chip seal that increased over the years, there is flow coming from High Street that goes down the Highlands driveway. Rick, me, and Ryan had walked it, and you could tell that some water is definitely wrapping the corner and then coming down.
But it's not designed to drain onto their property.
It shouldn't have been. It probably wasn't initially, but adding layers of chip seal,
Yeah.
you probably got rid of any hump that used to be in the road there.
You want to, Rick, would you like to come up to say, I don't know, I want to make sure that we're not.
Yeah, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover.
Yeah.
So.
All right. How you doing, Rick? Good.
I'm humbled up here now after listening to all of this. I did bring along, it seems like you may have what I've already got, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
so you more or less know what we're speaking of.
Right.
All right, well, on the agenda, it mentioned that we're after the town to take over a detention area and what have you. That's not really true. Most of this has been going on for 35 years, almost 40 years, and I've never had an issue. Nobody, until a year or so ago, when somebody mentioned to me something was going on with a water problem. The issue, what happened to me, the issue where it started with me was that all of a sudden I want to sell a building lot. The people come down to the town and they ask about the building lot. Is it a building lot? And what they get for an answer is, oh, there's a serious water problem over there. And I never knew there was a water problem at all until that's how I found out. They're coming back to saying, well, there's some kind of a real problem over there. So I look into it now, and I walked it, as Ryan said it, we walked it a month or so ago, whenever it was, and it works. The drainage there works. Now, the town has there's a 15-inch RCP that was put in to catch the water that was coming from the detention pond that is a little farther up the hill. And I always thought that the town owned the 15-inch RCP, and case closed. It was none of my business. And all of a sudden, I'm finding now that the town says they don't own the end of it. And I said, well, if you don't own the end of it, why did you put a grate on the end of it? And which I didn't care if they did that. That's not important. But they were maintaining it for a long, long time. And now all of a sudden, I'm trying to move a building lot, and I'm hearing all this headache. And I just don't think it's right. So all I'm asking is that the town take responsibility of a 15-inch RCP, which most homeowners don't have any way of handling that anyway. And just, that's the only thing and Ryan mentioned to me that the last 10 feet or something doesn't belong to the town because it's on my building lot. And I said, it's not a problem. If you want me to pull it out of there, I'll pull it out of there. But it's, or if you want me to do some kind of legal thing to make the town have possession of the last 10 feet, is fine. But that's the only thing I'm thinking of, is that pipe. And it's part of the town's storm drainage system. It has been for 35 or 40 years. So.
When you developed this, Rick, I'm looking at this one here. This is where the storm drain is. This is the first house here, right? The original house, if I'm looking at this right, coming down the lower, right?
Yeah.
And that's the driveway that goes out. So you're saying this is where the town put that in? Down to here?
If I understand, this is the...
That's the original house, yep.
Well, over in this area right here, we put a detention area.
Okay.
To stop, to hold water, obviously, you know very
Right.
well what it does. But we put a detention area here and a detention area over here. This one goes off to Culver Hill Road. This one goes down to Hilltop.
Okay.
This detention area. And the reason that 15-inch RCP was put in there was to catch the water from the detention area. But at the time, there was already some excess water going to Hilltop. And they thought the town, as we were developing this, the town felt that it was going to help correct the whole problem.
So you have another detention area over here, and this is the 15-inch that comes into, which would be over here?
Yeah, of course, I don't, that detention area isn't mine, but it's, there is, you know.
Is that what this is?
That's what I think it is, but
Here's Hilltop.
yeah.
This is the 15-inch coming up to, it ends, Ryan's saying the town only owns to here.
Right.
And they're saying that last 10 feet or something of the pipe, which there's the catch where it goes in the water. And then this goes up to the detention.
I thought we were having the problem down here. Right.
That is where the problem is. The problem's on this lot.
Right, but this block's behind, right here, behind Hilltop.
That's this
This
one?
one, this one.
Yeah, that's that one there. Yeah. So this is the one that we're showing that comes into Hilltop from here. And then
This
this,
is detention.
and this is the pipe that
No,
comes,
this is a detention area. There's a
Yeah.
pipe goes from here to here.
yeah,
Then there's an open ditch that goes down here. It collects right here and goes into the
Right.
pipe. and out.
No, I know this.
and we're having the issue down, you're having the issue down here.
I have the issue with all.
Because coming out of the pond,
Right, it's
out of
coming
the
out of the
detention
pond into this-
pond, it goes to the surface,
And then it
runs
comes-
across the surface, and then goes down into the.
Right, which isn't according to, it's not a
The
swale
solution is-
anymore.
The solution is put a pipe.
There's a pipe that goes right through here,
and
and then this is the catch basin.
It was
Now,
practically, they.
right where this
practically
line
this-
enters, right here, this is, so right here where the circle is,
Right,
there's this grade.
This is a path
So the
right here
town
that goes down,
installed this grade back in
and it was-
2021.
and it was supposed to
Bob,
be-
even though the
the
town
second swale
maintains,
goes
we
this way.
maintain that
Okay.
we don't
That's a
own the
natural
pipe right
swale.
here.
right.
So there's another
The
swale
town,
goes this way and the water.
So this is the pipe that runs
The
here.
type, yep, so
But
we own
obviously,
the
because of
pipe
heavy
from here
storms,
to
when you've
this
got a
line,
swale like that, you
but we
put a
don't
pipe
own
here, you're gonna get
currently
some cutting
from
around.
there to there.
So when you deal with it, you put a basin cover.
Yeah, oh, well, here, yeah, where the circle is, I think, yeah, so, yep, so Bob put that there.
All I'm saying is that the whole thing works. The only problem, apparently, what has happened, and Ryan mentioned it, was that the pipe, at one point, and during a heavy storm, it was, got caught up with brush and what
Yeah.
have you, and it overflowed. So the
It's
town went in and put a
we've
pipe
had it-
on top of the pipe, so that it stopped it from doing that.
Yeah,
That's all well and
no,
good,
that's
but
what Ryan's
you know,
concern
with the grade
is,
on top of the
is
pipe,
that
it also
we would
slows the
have
water.
a problem if this gets
All
clogged,
I'm
getting
saying
to
is
it.
that
Every time you
when have
maintain it,
heavy
you'll be
rain,
landscaping it again.
The town's
Yeah.
been maintaining it for 3-4 years. They've been walking in there once in a while in a heavy storm, cleaning it off.
The rain we're getting is different now than it's been in years too.
Well, Ryan, this is from Jacobson,
Right.
the research. It wasn't Ryan, it was it was.
I'm not,
Yeah.
I don't wanna say you.
No, I know, but the information we get from, this is, we have emails from January of 2021, and this is back when the flooding happened. And so as I think Ryan mentioned, the flooding occurred, and then the town came in and cleared it out back then. But to prevent more debris from clogging the drain and getting into what would be the town-owned portion of that pipe, that was when the former Public Works Director added that grate to prevent more rocks and things from clogging that and potentially creating another blockage in the future. Is that correct, Ryan? Okay.
And
So-
I'd say it works.
and it's been working. So I guess everything was everything, we haven't had a problem until the property went to be sold, right? And so the only thing, I guess I just don't understand why this wasn't solved back in 1985. You know, when the property was built and the drain put in and everything, how did we not know who owned what back in and who was responsible for what back in 1985? I guess it just seems so odd that 40 years we have something that's been unresolved. I guess, is that correct?
I never realized there was any problem, to be very honest with you. I thought the town owned the RCP, and that everything was working fine for 40 years. And then all of a sudden, something plugged over there, and it became a big issue. And to me, I don't even think it's a big issue now. The drainage and all that isn't even an issue.
So the pictures we saw where there's water on the property, it's not it's not the 21 Hilltop property? Is it somewhere else that the water's
I think this is 21 Hilltop.
That's 21.
Yeah. So this is 21 Hilltop. So
Okay.
this flooded the neighbor property who just has that easement with the pipe going through their property.
Oh, so you're not at 21?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm tired of
No, this is down a Hilltop. This is
He's
down
on,
Oh,
he's
okay.
on behind 20.
Gagman's property.
Oh, you're on, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize who was okay.
So the problem was, this clogged in 2021. The town came in and fixed it, although the records indicate that the town never accepted ownership of this. In fact, the same thing that we're talking about today, they talked about in 1985, about it being a liability on the town.
Carol
And-
Joseph said it right there in that
Yeah,
paragraph.
Exactly, so that's the hardest part, is that we're looking at the exact same issue almost 40 years later, and nothing's really changed.
So this is what they looked at in '85 was, if they took ownership of it and it clogged like it did and floods someone's house, the town is responsible for it.
I believe that what the town was talking about, I didn't know that at the time they were even talking about it. But looking at that letter, I believe that the town was talking about the swale, not the 15-inch RCP. They didn't want to maintain a swale across somebody's property. But the 15-inch RCP is part of the town's stormwater system. They couldn't possibly not accept that.
But the swale gets the water to the pipe. So the pipe is fine laying there all this time, but I guess they're probably saying we were gonna have to do a lot of work to maintain that swale in the middle of all these properties.
Now,
To
to be
make sure
honest
the
with
water can nicely flow to that pipe, right?
The swale is even working. It's been working for all this time. It's not an issue. The issue was when it enters the pipe. And what happened apparently, because I'm getting this all I'm hearing how it happened. But apparently the pipe was a 15-inch pipe and it plugged with brush and leaves. So it overflowed and it went where it wasn't supposed to go. And so the town went in and cleaned it out, and then they put a steel grate over the end of the
Yeah, now I
pipe.
see the picture.
And just like you do over most catch basins and what have you. And as everybody knows, when you get a serious storm, the catch basins on the town roads get plugged. And somebody's got to just clean the brush off the top of them.
But I still think it goes back to the paragraph, 1985, about the liability. And we're going back to the same discussion.
Well, after Carol Josephs made that statement, it was a motion to have the town attorney review it.
They
And
never
I think
came-
is that when they struck it all from the discussion?
There's 2 minutes that are in your packet. There's the Board of Selectmen minutes from June 13th, 1985, and then there's planning and zoning minutes from May 16th, 1985. So the planning and zoning minutes are actually before the Board of Selectmen minutes. And that, as Ryan read, that planning and zoning minutes referenced that Mr. Seiferman indicated that the Board of Selectmen voted to reject the plans as submitted due to liability problems and maintenance costs. So It then came back on June 13th, 1985, but then the board at the time, they did discuss it, and then they said that they would have it seek advice from the town attorney, and then I couldn't find any records of the board taking it back up again. And so, as I told Rick, I thought it would be appropriate to bring it back before the board at a much later date, and it's a new board, but all we have to go by is this information here that we have. So we're wrestling with the same problem that our predecessors on this board and planning and zoning had the same concerns.
Yeah, because it's right here, grass channel to be privately maintained in lot number 10 is designed on the natural traffic of the water.
But the grass channel, that still is
That's
to be
still-
privately maintained,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
So nothing's changed with that.
But that final statement on the May 16th 85 document, after they go through the discussion, after short discussion, the commissioners agreed to remove all references to the maintenance of the basins and ditch from the map. Does that mean they accepted that? I don't.
That's when it was deleted, so it said, to be maintained by the town of Forest. And then it was deleted. But it was never put a note on to be maintained by homeowners.
Got it.
So we left it ambiguous for all this time, and which is why when it did flood, the town just came in and fixed it at the town's expense. So it's happened before, it will happen again. As Rick said, I believe we may have done maintenance over the years, is that?
I certainly didn't do
Yeah.
anything with it, and as far as what we've done is just what we always do. I thought everything was taken care of, and it was a case closed, just, I didn't know there was any details left.
Yeah, I'm reading it again now, what Ryan said. That's exactly what happened in 85. They had the discussion, they just removed all references from town maintenance, but didn't put any other detail about how it should be done.
Yeah. And then no standards or guidelines to follow to tell people.
To tell people what they had to do to maintain it.
To keep it maintained.
Yeah.
Keep it free of clear, leaves, whatever it is, just a bullet point list.
And what you're saying right now is if the town had to do any maintenance, if they had to get into that property, whatever mess we made, we gotta clean up every time.
So who maintains the detention basins on the other properties, those two?
They're self-maintained, people mow grass on them, what have you, but they're not, nobody really does anything.
Pretty
to
much
it.
it's just like a depression on their property.
That's what it is, yes. It's slow, when it rains, it puddles.
Yeah.
But then it slowly drains.
Is that an actual, is that an actual basin with a reservoir? Ryan, do you know? Is it like, or is it just a short basin with the pipe going into it? Or is it not a basin at all with just a
It's the
hole
end
with a
of
pipe?
It's the end of a trench, I would say,
With a pipe in it going out?
with a pipe at the end. It probably was a little bigger than it is today, it just eroded in.
Could the problem, you mentioned, Ryan, earlier that maybe over the years of chip seal on High Street, they were driving more water down that storm drain. Could the water that's causing the problem be resolved by grinding away that chip seal near that drain, or that wouldn't solve it either?
There would still be water from the Highlands property going down there. There's two catch basins on the driveway. If you come into the Highlands property before the high school, if you're heading from 66, you make that left and then make a quick right. There's two catch basins right there that eventually flow out into what is called the detention area, and then under a pipe across one driveway and then into that swale. So there's water designed on the property itself to go there. There's some additional water that flows in from
So,
high school. So no
if-
matter what, it would be a problem.
Yeah.
So,
if we don't consider the water from High Street, how big is the development that the houses are on? Was it like 12 acres in there, 14 acres?
Oh, the whole property was probably 28 acres or so.
And
But
that
that's-
all flows
is-
in this
is cut
direction,
into-
obviously, because it's a hill.
There's more than one detention basin. Some of that, a different detention basin goes to Cobble Hill Road.
right, there's
Okay.
one down here that goes down that way. So it looks like on this print you have that, I don't have a legend here, but I would think that looks like maybe stone in there. And you have a 3-foot elevation change where this is right here, where the swale comes into here and then it's piped out to Hilltop. Right? See that? Doesn't that look like that?
well, the pipe is into the ground.
Right, yeah, so it looks like you just dropped it a little or whatever, because the swale is in there and had to go into something, I'm sure, when you were doing the site work. Why don't you put a catch basin in there? You're gonna be building on there.
What?
No, that's not a catch basin, that's just a grate over about where the pipe comes in. I'm talking putting a catch basin with a reservoir and letting it.
I don't
Would
think
that work?
I don't think a catch basin would work.
No, it's the end of the swale. So the swale, and it would have to enter a pipe. So it would have to do what it already does. To enter the pipes for the drainage system. I know what you're saying, a catch basin at a lower elevation.
So when it came in and-
Ryan, you gotta go on this, you gotta get it up.
Yes.
Yeah, so adding a catch basin there wouldn't really work because the pipe is, say, at this elevation and the bottom of the swale, well, I guess the bottom of the pipe is here, but getting a catch basin added at the elevation it would need to be added, and then piping it, you'd have to go back uphill
So,
to get it to flow into our system. Or you'd have to repipe the whole thing going
All right,
down
so
onto
the
Hilltop.
pipe's pretty much level with the catch basin at the end, where it goes on Hilltop?
Yeah.
Is what you're saying, it's,
Yeah, I mean, you could try and chase it back uphill to a point and like pave a catch basin area. I know kind of what you're saying, but it's, I don't know, that would have to be.
I just think over time, and what you're trying to do, things change over time, and you're gonna have to come up with something, a new fix
Know that.
for this property now that you wanna, you know how that goes. 20 years ago, everything worked the way it should, and then Mother Nature takes over.
Yeah, again, I want to reiterate that access is a big part of the problem here.
Right.
To get an excavator back there from either direction. We would have to take trees down or, redo someone's lawn. Probably trees down in both directions. I think even coming from Hilltop, once you hit the wood line, you'd have to take some trees out to get to that sediment pond area.
What did we do in 2021 when we had the problem? I know you weren't here, obviously.
We had guys go clear out the pipe by hand.
By hand?
Yeah. Shovels, rakes.
And they carried that
Carry
cover,
that,
that basin
yeah.
cover out there too, to drop it
Yeah.
over it?
In the winter, yeah.
Oh, man.
It's tough.
I'm at a loss on this one.
I don't,
Water's tough.
Hey, we'll just blame it on the woman that took minutes in 1985.
It was my soon-to-be wife.
Yeah, I think we need to bring more of Branscombe up here.
Wow.
You guys are still laughing.
Well, I mean, it's one of these things that's, I don't know, it's tough.
I mean, we can think it over. We don't have to decide tonight, too, if you wanna wait on it.
But we gotta
Not
come
the
up
40
with
years.
You gotta get a solution.
something that makes it, if we're, whatever we're gonna do, that.
Yeah, I think no matter what, no matter how it's left, if it's on the homeowner, there needs to be guidelines or something to follow that if someone were to buy that property, it says you need to do this, this, and this.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem is.
Would that come up in the
They don't,
sale?
it's a question mark. Someone's like, oh, there's a drainage problem. I don't even know what to do. The town can't even tell me, how to do it.
Well, it's hard because it's all the other properties draining onto your property.
Yeah.
And then
And then
if you
entering
buy
the
that,
town
now you're
system.
responsible for flooding other people's property with water that didn't start on your property.
Correct. Yeah, you're inheriting a problem, which is.
A 40-year-old problem.
Yeah. Which is tough, especially if you tell an insurance company that they're not
How
gonna
many
want it.
times has it been a problem?
Well, only the one time that I know. I'm
Yeah.
just saying.
But I mean,
having it
but
be.
you have to look down the road, you
Yeah.
gotta have something in place,
Yeah, that's the woods and stuff like that, that's what's happening.
because you can't just say, I got a water issue, how are you gonna
All
fix
these
it?
homeowners know town property.
when you
back
go and
then.
sell it.
All
That's
homeowners.
what he's trying to sell here.
Should sell that corner there.
The only way to avoid tearing up property is going from this driveway here, and then you got a ton of trees to take out to get there.
Well, that's the,
So
Was it
so it's
common
either
practice
tearing
back
up
then
property
that
grass
from the
or
detention pond
lots
up
of
by the
trees.
houses, why didn't they pipe it all the way down to the drain? Why did they let it resurface?
So it's kind of on the surface the whole time. Well, it dumps right out and then flows down the surface, and then it only re-enters a pipe going underneath the roadway, then back out into this trench.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, it could have been a pipe the whole entire way. It's just more cost, I imagine.
Yeah.
how
So-
big's that pipe?
15 inch at the
15
one end.
feet, pretty
Yeah.
big pipe.
Yeah.
I struggle with the sentence that the Board of Selectmen voted to reject the plan as submitted due to liability problems and maintenance costs. I don't know what's changed since then. Like, that's.
You know how many COs we've gotten over on that property, in the last 40 years? So we've been building houses and what have you, nobody said anything about anything.
Yeah.
I didn't
Well, they
listen to
did,
the issue.
they did. They said it in the minutes of the meeting.
Oh.
They-
See, those things I'm not aware of, okay, that
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah, so
Your attorney was.
When the
Is that
notes-
your attorney?
Yeah,
when the
but-
notes got deleted and never added back to the plans, a lot of this stuff might not have been relayed, and Rick just thought it was taken care of. The pipe, the water made it all the way down. The town had the easement on the hilltop property for the pipe to go in. It's understood why you thought this was taken care of, especially the fact that it doesn't come up for 30-something years. If it comes up 3 years later, then okay, yeah, what happened 3 years ago?
But over 30-year time, and, things change with the land, you have sediment from leaves and trees, and elevations change, and it causes, it's not unusual to have water problems somewhere where you didn't 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Well, there's even more water coming down that way now because of all the work that's been done by the school and all that too. And by the water towers and so on and so forth. There's a lot more water coming down now than there was 40 years ago.
I know, but the town didn't want to take ownership then.
Right.
That's the point, like, the town didn't want to
I
take.
think that they're only I don't think we're talking about the same thing, Ryan. I'm talking about the 15-inch RCP and the end of it, where the water goes in. I don't think that's what the town said they didn't want, because they accepted the 15-inch RCP. It belongs to the town. So the only thing that Ryan was saying to me is, the very end of it doesn't belong to the town because it's on your lot. In other words, they don't have a right-of-way right there. So I said, well, we could extend the right-of-way to that extra 10 feet or something, so the town owns the whole thing. But the pipe belongs to the town, that never belonged to me.
It says the maintenance of the detention basins. Is that
Yeah,
what we're talking about?
No, the detention basin's up the hill, there's no problem with it.
Concerning maintenance of the
Well, this
detention
is
basin?
considered isn't it?
So isn't, I thought this was, forgive me if I'm wrong, is this the detention basin? Is this a detention basin?
Well, that was a detention basin, it's now just eroded in, and it's the end of a trench, I would call it.
Okay.
Where the water runs.
Because all we have are these minutes. During the motion, there was a discussion concerning the maintenance of the detention basins. So if,
On this plan here.
if that's not what we're talking about.
That's
then-
what I
See, this is the detention basin here. Here's Hilltop Drive.
Yep.
Here's the pipe.
Yep.
This is the detention basin.
Yep.
The detention basin stands on
This
its
is
own
the site
because
plan.
there's-
He's saying, you know,
There's a
Right.
driveway in between here.
Yeah.
There's a pipe
But
line
here-
underneath the driveway from the detention
This is the
basin
problem. You could see
to
this was dug out
this
3 foot.
Swale.
Yeah.
And then goes into the swale, and this runs
Right.
through the swale,
Right.
and it drops into the concrete pipe at this, down
If
here,
you
that's
look at-
another
this
3
is
But that's,
probably-
so is this a basin, or is, would you
This
call
looks
this a
like the
basin?
No,
or not?
because you weren't
I would
here,
call
but
it-
why did we run a pipe to that
If you
point?
took a 15-inch pipe,
Where'd that go?
pretty big, put it underground.
the development,
put it-
figure out a way to
and
get
then
the
you
water.
So we
dig
put
the
a
ground in
pipe
front of the
onto
house.
his
Yeah.
property,
There was no
and
river.
everything
So
from that
All the
pipe
water
on.
runs to this,
Yeah.
this corner. So there was,
So yes, this is a basin.
there's nothing
in
else
that
they could
sense.
possibly do except.
Yeah, that's
run it
what-
into
okay.
the
But
pipe.
that's what the town
These
pretty much
houses
said
are
was,
here on
here,
Hilltop.
we'll
When we're
connect you
saying
to our
detention
system,
basin,
but
but
everything
you're
else is
not
your
talking-
responsibility.
Right.
You're talking about this.
That's what they said at the time. We'll take the pipe.
The swale.
We
The-
put,
I
you
think-
know, the
I
town
think
gave
the
them
Board
the
of Selectmen
easement.
were talking about
Get
the
the pipe
swale
from
from
here.
here
We
to
took the
here.
pipe, but
They
we didn't
definitely
want the
weren't
rest of
talking
it.
about a
But
15-inch
but you can
RCP
see
because
where
they
they,
accepted it.
Yeah.
see how they cut that.
Yeah, it's kind of what.
That's
Yeah.
that's
15-inch
engineering
RCP, we
notes.
gotta
It's
get it
wherever,
right away.
whatever ended the 15-inch.
For this swale, so that is.
They don't want any part of what
Yeah.
was leading
It
up to
wasn't,
that pipe.
That's
Just
what I
what
mentioned. They were saying-
Yeah, that's what,
Yes,
that's
that's-
what, I think we're all, that's what we're talking about, though, yeah.
Specific to do.
So where
That's
the
funny,
town
how
has
small that
ownership
detention
now,
basin is,
I think that's
and
where
how
the
big
town
this
is
one is.
Well,
comfortable
that's
with
normal.
then, right?
So when you first do a development, like out at Ridgeview,
That was to there.
But then you still
The
have.
problem is
in,
that what happened was either.
most of them, there's a
Either they omitted
formula,
it, or I
right?
admit, I don't know what
You
happened.
have to be
The end of the pipe wound up 10
And
feet
then
past.
a lot of
So it's
times.
10
at the
feet onto
time
your
now,
property,
they just
more.
Where there's an actual
build.
right of,
Yeah.
right of way or
Yeah.
town,
So,
you know.
but this
easement.
one is just,
Town has an
I
easement
bet
area
if you
where
want
they
that,
own
the thing is.
Does the easement go onto your property?
Way
No.
it was
By about 10 feet.
20 years
No,
ago.
the
No,
easement
that's the
doesn't.
thing, is this
No, the
even still
easement
there?
doesn't.
Or
The
does
easement
somebody
doesn't.
say-
It ends
does
at the
somebody
end of
say, I
21.
wanna
That's
level out my
exactly-
yard,
the easement
and
ended
now
right
it's
there,
level,
but
it's
there's
not,
still
it's not
10 more
dipping
small
out.
feet of that pipe
The
onto your
easement
house.
ends, the easement ends where this red line is.
Right.
So the
Right.
easement, here's the
I
end
can't
of
go
the
to someone and
property,
tell
all
them they
right?
gotta put the swale
Where
back
the
on their property.
easement ends,
Or they've gotta-
wherever
If
the
it's on
property
their plan.
boundary is. And then
The
the 10
engineer, yeah,
feet,
the town
10
engineer
feet is
said,
this, that
Jeff
is
on
wrote
his
a
property.
memorandum that they
yeah,
need to
it's
put
from
this
here
in
to here,
the
wherever 10
plan,
feet is,
but
yes.
There's no
So-
like enforcement.
Right.
So that's the problem
Yes,
is,
the zoning
right
enforcement,
now,
maybe.
the way it's been since,
I looked in
since
the
its
ordinance, I couldn't
incorporation
find
was,
anything that I could point to and
it's
say,
been the owner of the
this
property
ordinance
responsible for that. And
What's the cost?
It didn't come up
when
as an
this comes
issue
up,
until
when there's, like,
2021.
Too much water, what's the
Because
cost to
if
town?
you had sold the property earlier,
It's-
this would have
it's
come
not
up.
even that.
You know, it
The
would have come up.
pavement,
It's,
if
uh,
They're
it-
going to
if
sell
it
the
hurt
property
houses,
and
what's a
flooded,
house?
so
Right.
21
You know, might be the
Hilltop is saying, wait a
reliability
minute
to the
before you
damage
sell
that
the
I got.
property.
It's a
No,
big
no,
issue.
not
Yeah.
21 Hilltop. The problem is, to Rick's point,
Because it was poured
he's
right
trying to
on
sell the
it.
property.
It
And when
falls
he's-
back on
and
us.
this is
The town
unresolved,
may
so when
find
someone
that
is
we
called
don't
to
want that
town hall,
responsibility. it
I don't
is.
know
We see a
who, but
problem.
apparently somebody has said,
And
oh, there's
2021,
a drainage issue
Shay
on this
addressed the
property.
problem when they
And
started
that
having
is
condos
causing a
on
problem
Hilltop
with
Drive.
Rick being able to
So-
sell,
so
the
your
Rick
best
would like to
judgment is
sell the
we should have some
property.
responsibility.
But this
No,
is
but
still
we also need a way
unresolved.
to
So either
tell
the
people
town
to
takes
maintain their
ownership,
private
which we do, or we don't, and there's another solution.
Make it
But those are really the only
From
two options.
Jacobson saying, you know,
So we
need to
we
maintain
need to
exactly how it is on the plan.
kind of come together and kind
Keep it
of
as simple
either,
as that.
either
Fine. If not, there's
wait
a fine of
or
X
make a
amount of
decision.
dollars
I mean, it's up to
per
this
day.
board,
I
but
always
we,
thought there
I
was.
mean, we have other
We're gonna
things.
make it
We're
technical,
still
but
getting
it's not
involved
a
in
technical
something where we're
decision.
now
Yeah.
checking
Yeah.
with
Do we
private
want to wait
drainage
on this?
But what are we, I mean, what are we gonna get?
We're gonna, I think, I don't know, I just want to get the board's opinion on it. Can you guys go up to the podium?
You just want to table this?
I would say we could either, we
We're
have,
gonna collect
we
more
could have three options. We could table this, we could take ownership of it, or we don't. I mean, I guess, do we want to go down and see how everyone feels about it? I mean, which way are you leaning? Does anybody want to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
I can understand why in '85, they decided that they didn't want to take responsibility for it. Because it's
Guys,
in,
could you,
it's in the woods, it's hard to maintain, it's hard to get to, it's on private property. And when the development was made, it looks, because none of us were there, they ran the pipe onto the property to say, okay, your drainage will go towards this. But beyond that pipe, the town doesn't own anything. They just ran the pipe onto the property. And I can see why they didn't want to touch it, because when there's a problem, now the town's liable and we have to fix everything.
I'm going by what they wrote back in '85. I feel that there is no way, I feel that it should be up to the developer to maintain or put into a deed or recommendations or something, but the developer should be liable to maintain that. I don't feel it should be the town's responsibility. And in '85, they didn't feel it should have been, and I stand by their decision.
You guys? Mike? Anybody else?
I tend to concur with the decisions of previous boards. Like the guys are saying, the only thing is, Ryan, you had mentioned, the one red flag in this whole thing is that after the decision was made in '85, it doesn't appear that there was any guidance given to the property owners as to how to maintain that stuff. You know, and if anything, I think we should, I don't know how that would work, but there has to be something placed in the maps or in the deed or something that explains what you do within state requirements to keep that flowing properly. But I don't, this has been beat up a number of times apparently, and I think we still have the same resolution, the same feeling about it.
Yeah, I don't see how you can say you're gonna have the town go on to that amount, be responsible for that amount of property that's not even town property. It's a lot, you're talking about large stretch probably in order to satisfy dealing with the problem. And it's not a trivial project to even get there.
Just dropping the trees. I mean, maybe 40 years ago, half of those trees were this big around instead of this big around, but even so, I don't know. It's unfortunate, but what do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, that was, the reason why we put this in your packets is because the best that we can go by is this information. It's hard to say exactly, Rick, has said that, we don't know exactly what these boards were talking about, but, all we can do is take the minutes for what they said. And the minutes said there was a discussion concerning the maintenance of the detention basins. I take that to mean all of the detention basins, including the one that we're talking about, acts as a basin, basically. And they indicated that the Board of Selectmen voted to reject the plan as submitted due to liability problems and maintenance costs. I mean, I struggle with with reversing a previous board's decision is where I struggle with this. And I told that to Rick, I said that. I mean, that it's, why this was never sorted out, I don't understand, because this should have been sorted out in 1985. But, talking with Ryan, we thought that if this lot was going to be sold, it would have to go through the town engineer, and the town engineer would then recommend, most likely, that this basin or swale be brought back to and restored to its condition, its original condition. Is that right, Ryan? And so
Yeah.
at that time, I would be under the impression that there would be additional requirements put on the property then as far as the maintenance of that. Would that not be a recommendation from the town engineer upon the sale of the property?
It would be.
So, I mean, this will be.
Not the sale of the property, so to say, but the development of the property.
In order to.
So when the house is proposed to go on the property, this is part of the lot and what needs to be done.
What could be done? There's only a small portion of that belongs in that property.
Correct, yeah, so it would only be from here to here.
So why couldn't we just take off a piece of the RCP that's on my property now and leave it on the town's property? In other words, what I'm saying is the RCP extends 10 feet onto my property. I could pull that, move the 10 feet back, and the whole thing will be on the town property.
You just cut out the RCP. I'm not following that.
So he's proposing to change the approved engineered plans for this whole drainage area and to kick the pipe back onto, so the pipe ends at the end of the town property, and then everything coming from that sediment pond, and once it clogs on our pipe, now it's just the town's problem, and the town, then how does the town say, well, you didn't maintain the whole swale and the sediment pond leading up to the end of the pipe? I think that would be a change to what was approved on the plans, and then I don't know how enforcement of that goes forward. Or saying that you change something, you need to change it back. But I get what Rick is saying. He's saying he should have the freedom to remove that section of pipe because it's his.
Yeah, I see that.
But still, so I understand what you're saying, and if you remove it, but that still doesn't get around the fact that there's gonna be a water issue, right?
No.
So you're still, if they call town hall, they're still gonna say there's a water issue, right? I mean, by removing that 15 feet, I don't know if it necessarily shifts it to say that it's the town's.
The pipe is just a conduit to bring the water down, but the water source of that, to that pipe, is still up in the trees.
Yeah.
So if there's a problem and 21 Hilltop gets flooded right now, the town would most likely, correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, step in and solve the problem. The only difference right now is that we would then turn to the property owner of this and say they're responsible for the payment of it, as opposed to the town taking the liability. I mean, if there's a problem, the town's still gonna have to fix it and then recoup the costs. I mean, the only difference then would be who pays for the costs when that happens. And if it's the town, then we're taking on additional liability that we never agreed to in the first place. That's really what it comes down to. Unless we want to take it on, I mean, and which we could. I mean, but it seems to be against what previous boards have discussed and decided to do.
Right.
That's.
So even though the board said in 1985, we don't want to take control of it, we still maintain it and fix it when there's a problem anyways now.
We have been, allegedly.
Yeah.
Like when it clogged in 2021, as Ryan said, we went in by hand and took it out, and at the time,
So-
we put in a grate.
Why don't we just keep doing that?
Because now.
They're trying to sell the property.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, because the sale of the property has forced this issue back after 40 years. That was never resolved. That's why. Or you could argue it was resolved. You know, we just didn't have plans as far as how the property owner would deal with this.
The issue is if someone calls to ask if there's anything with this property, the town would have to disclose that there is a drainage swale on the back end of the property to a sediment pond that would need to be maintained. Because
Okay.
that's the truth of it, and that's what Rick is arguing.
So if I
It's
bought
hindered the
if
sale
I
of the
bought the
property.
property, what is my responsibility because it's on my property?
Correct, so that would be, at the time when you develop that property, the town engineer would then tell you, you gotta maintain this sediment pond on the back end and keep it 3 feet down, full of riprap, whatever it was on the original plans.
And I would like to point out that back in 2021, the town has maintained this, and when there was a problem, the town came in, we put a grate in, but the town didn't charge for any of that, correct? Rick, you didn't get a bill or anything?
But I pay plenty of taxes.
No, I know you do. I know you pay. No, but what I'm saying is the town has always done its due diligence and to make sure that if there's a problem, we're going to get it resolved. And up until now, there has not been an issue where there's been a big liability that the town has had to pass on to the property owner here. That's never been an issue. We're kind of talking in theoreticals right now. If there were to be an issue, and we know that they've come up in the past, and they're going to come up again. And so if we fix it now, or if it gets fixed now, if the property owner fixes this, and the town takes ownership, in 20, 30 years, we're going to have this problem again. And then at that point, the town would have to pay to do all this. Whereas right now, we don't necessarily have to pay, but we have, I guess, is where we're at, right? Is that correct, Ryan?
Yeah, so
Correct.
So, I mean, I don't know. I like to be, like, I want to be able to help, but I also don't want, just as the board in 1985 didn't want additional liability, I still don't see what's changed. That's what it comes down to.
My personal thoughts, which I'd let you know before when Rick and I met, would be to turn that sediment pond into what it was originally on the plans, and the grass swale at least up to the property line. So, well, not the grass swale, but the trench. Just make it as nice as possible. Rock, riprap in there, and then let the future homeowner know that it's to stay like this. Would be a simple solution, but
What would be the time frame or the cost to get that done, or to do that?
I'm not sure. Well, it would be Rick doing the work.
Right.
Yeah.
But what would be the point of doing that if it's not how it should be on lot 10? If lot
That's what I mean, yeah.
If lot 10 is still gonna be eroded and not functioning how it did 30 years ago, what's the point of making the end right if the rest of it isn't?
And I agree with that point.
Problem
Yeah.
sounds bigger than it is, though, because
Does lot 10 got a house on it now?
it's not.
Is it a
Right now,
swale or
it's
is-
working. It's really at the entry to the pipe that it all becomes a problem because of the debris that flows into it and can potentially clog the pipe. So the rest of it is not as big of a problem as the end of it going into the pipe. That would be the biggest problem where you can have issues. Either way, I wanted to throw that potential solution out there. Just, I think that might help the sale of the property, someone that's interested in it. If you had it all set up the way it is on the plans, Jeff Jacobson gives his approval on it. And then any potential buyer, they could just be shown that and just say, hey, keep it nice like this, free of debris. And
If we took your idea, Ryan, and then, sounds like that 10 feet that Rick was talking about lopping off, and I really don't want to do that because that's modifying an originally approved
plan.
Yeah, I think. we would
But
need
if we
to-
were to, I think Rick might have mentioned it as an option earlier, if we were to take that little section of land that 10 feet of pipe is on and call it town property, make it town property, so that the entire pipe is on our property now. And then if that swale was put back to its original form, then we would have the ability to, on town property, annually access the back end of that pipe and just keep it clear.
Then we're still taking,
The issue with
But we
that
own the
is-
pipe right now, except for that last 10 feet.
The issue is still access from Hilltop and taking an excavator over someone's lawn and
Yeah.
No matter
running
what,
out
it's
their
not-
lawn.
Can't clear it by hand, you're still in the same.
Still in the same boat.
Which we have never been in that boat, but it could happen. Just to point out, we have not had this problem.
I still think we gotta go by what the previous board.
Does anyone think that we should take ownership of the additional pipe?
no.
Mike, you have a way to?
No.
Okay.
I just threw it out there just for discussion purposes, but I think what Ryan's idea about reclaiming that swale to its original dimensions.
Yeah. This is, I mean, it's still a valuable piece of property. You're gonna be able to sell the property with or without the town taking ownership of this. It does add another layer, but that layer has always existed. And a previous board has weighed in with this decision, and with the facts being the same, it's hard to overturn a previous board's decision. That's really what it comes down to. I think there's consensus on the board. I don't know, there's consensus. I think we don't need to take a vote unless.
No.
So I think this is closed, I think. Rick, I'm sorry. It's not public, it's not public comment, but you are the real estate, if you'd like to come up, and you can, Angela, but. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to refunds of excess payments.
Refunds excess
Motion for refund of excess payment for Rose and Todd Austin, $310.26.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for refund of excess payment, Nissan Infiniti LT LLC, $187.85.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, Anthony S. Giampapa Jr., $695.22.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, William N. DeRose, $361.06.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, Kathy J. Clark Living Trust, $462.62.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, Margaret A. Kirkpatrick, $50.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, Teresa J. Deegan, $634.01.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment, Rhea Yvonne Tompkins and David J. Couture, $72.06.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries.
Motion for a refund of excess payment for Kevin P. Kelly, $171.06 and $136.19.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention, motion carries. thank you both, thank you all. I'm gonna be brief as we move on to the next item, status and committee reports. I'll just update, you may have seen I did a post today about the track. This concrete's being poured at the track today and tomorrow. They're moving very quickly on that. It's really great to see. I put a video and some pictures up. I also want to thank Mike for your pictures at Brainerd Place today as well. It's great to see the progress over there. They're just about done with all of the foundation and first floor concrete pouring, and they are moving on to the framing for the last week of the month, and then they'll be doing about 2 floors a week on the framing going up. And also, I do want to mention that I did receive some complaints from residents as far as noise on Perry Avenue. Apparently trucks have come as early as 4:30 and started making noise at the Brainerd site. So I spoke with the site manager and a couple of people today about it. And I just want the board to be aware. I've asked our police officers to stop over there around 5:30 in the morning and make sure that everyone is being quiet until 7 o'clock.
Well, they had 6 mixers in a pump truck this morning at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, and then so that's against our ordinances. They assured me that will not happen tomorrow, and it better not. So we want to make sure that we like the building, but we want to make sure it happens between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m.
Midnight.
Anyways, I just want to let you guys know that. All right, I'll turn it over to Ralph.
All right, I'll try to be quick, although I have a lot, but EDC, they're working on how they're going to acknowledge the business of the quarter and the Garden Club contest winners. They were talked about that. They also talked about the plan to participate with the October 21st festival that will be in line with after the 5K race that Park and Rec has. So all of the things I'm a liaison for, we'll be talking about what they're going to do for the 21st. Let's probably go with ADC. Park and Rec, obviously, I already referenced the Kids Blast space that was lost has been a problem because they have to figure out how they're going to work with it. So they're trying to make do with the space they have. They also started talking about their long-range capital plan to try to update it, so that would be a good thing. Hasn't been touched in a while, probably, deeply. Water and sewer, the well is in very good shape because obviously it rains all the time, so it's in good shape. Obviously, I was waiting on a water report, but Ryan already kind of gave us the scoop on that, so that's really good. That's great news. That's excellent news. Collection on delinquent accounts is going well. With regards to specific water projects, they were going to do a scenic drive valve fix like today or start it. They did do it today. The steep grant for the work on High Street, obviously that application has to be in on the 18th of August. The Russell Avenue project is ready to go out to bid. Brainerd, the work on Perry, the water work on Perry is going to start the last week of August. And that's water, sewer, the clarifier project that they got back, and the lowest bid is still higher than they had expected, so they're trying to do some value engineering on it. And the Co-Avenue Engineering, I think the paperwork and everything they've done is under review, right, at this point?
Yeah.
And that is that in a nutshell.
I have one more thing to add. I forgot to mention, I just want this board to know, you probably have already seen it, but the 24th, August 24th is the release day of the Aragoni Bridge stamp at the Postal Service, and Portland's post office is designated as the first day of issuance post office. We're the only post office in the country to be the first day of issuance. And this is a really big deal. We're going to have a ceremony, an event at the Senior Center at 11 a.m. on the 24th. I know Middletown Mayor Ben Forsheim will be joining, as well as State Senator Norm Needleman. We're working on maybe some additional statewide dignitaries that might be able to make it, but it's a really a big event for the town of Portland and also the state and also the city of Middletown as well. So I hope you can make it. If you can, please register. I'm told we're almost up to 50 registrants already, and we just opened it up a few days ago.
Cool.
So things, looks like it's gonna be a good turnout.
Do you know the first baby pushed across that bridge when they opened it up?
Was it you?
Was my mother. My mother. She was in a carriage. My grandfather was a welder, and he was she was the first
That's
one
pretty
pushed
cool.
over the bridge.
That's pretty cool.
I'm trying to think if there's anybody that worked on that bridge that might still be around. They won't be. But
I don't, but the family
The
will be.
family's still,
The
yeah.
family of
Yeah.
the Charles Aragoni, I believe, is going to be at
That's really
the
cool.
event, and so it's yeah. So anyways, hope to see you there. Dave, I hope you'll be there with your camera. All right. Great. Anybody else for committee status and committee reports?
Nada.
We'll open it up to public comment. I think we wore everyone out.
We have no public.
We've lost them. Oh, my
Okay.
God.
Is there anyone on the chat? No one on the chat. All right.
Don's holding strong.
We'll move on to Board of Selectmen general informal discussion. Does anyone have anything?
Not
to say?
tonight.
I just have
Not
one
tonight.
thing to say. I'll at least just say the quick thing.
Yeah.
There is some paperwork where they got a rough estimate on putting cameras at the new park, so
Okay.
I'd like us to discuss it in a future meeting, not today.
I asked Ralph to bring this up too, because I think we all know we do need cameras at the new park. We spent a lot of money building it. We might as well spend a little bit of money to protect it.
Protecting it, right?
So I think we're all in agreement on this. I know Ralph is very passionate about it, but you know, he is waning on his time with us, so.
It doesn't mean you're not gonna
This is
hear
the
from him
last
again.
thing.
He's gonna chair our new facilities study committee.
Next.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Ralph. So we'll revisit that at some point between, most likely September, October. Okay. And with that, we'll move on. I have nothing under follow-up items. We do have an executive session tonight with a grievance, which is step 3 of Officer Michael Fitzpatrick. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session, and I'd like to invite our town attorney, Joe McQuaid. Is there a motion?
I make a motion.
I'll second it.
Got it.
Second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
So at 10:08 PM, we will enter executive session. So I'll thank everybody else. You guys are off the hook. Thank you. We'll shut up at the end. We'll close everything up.